A man born into cruelty doesn't believe in second chances, until a woman's kindness becomes the one thing he can't walk away from. In 1876 Kansas, Cole Maddox rode into Willow Bend expecting nothing, and a shopkeeper's daughter saw something in him worth saving. But when his violent past collides with her peaceful world, he'll have to choose between the shadows he knows and the light she offers. Stay until the end, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Kansas wind carried dust and regret in equal measure the day Cole Maddox rode into Willow Bend. It was late September 1876, and the prairie stretched endless on all sides of the tiny settlement, a handful of wooden buildings clinging to existence like stubborn weeds in cracked earth. Cole sat his horse at the edge of town, one hand resting on his thigh near the Colt revolver that had become more familiar to him than any human touch, and studied the street ahead with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. He was 32 years old, and looked older. The sun had carved lines into his face that grief had deepened. His jaw carried 3 days of stubble the color of iron shavings, and his clothes, a worn duster over a faded blue shirt and dusty trousers, hung on a frame that had once been broader, before hunger and hard living had whittled him down to gristle and bone. His hat, stained with sweat and rain and blood he'd never quite managed to wash out, sat low over eyes the color of winter sky. Cole had no intention of staying. He never did. Willow Bend was just another nameless stop on a journey that had no destination, only distance. Distance from Missouri, where he'd buried his wife and infant daughter 7 years ago. Distance from the badge he'd worn in Nebraska before corruption ate the department from the inside, and he'd walked away rather than become part of it. Distance from himself, though that was a race he could never win. The town looked peaceful enough, too peaceful for a man like him. A general store with painted letters peeling in the sun, a blacksmith's forge sending up lazy smoke, a saloon called the Brass Rail with batwing doors that had seen better days, a church with a modest steeple, its bells silent in the afternoon heat. Maybe 24 buildings in all, and perhaps 100 souls trying to carve civilization out of raw land. His horse, a gray gelding named Ash, the only companion Cole allowed himself, shifted beneath him, eager for water and rest. Cole clicked his tongue softly and urged the animal forward into the town proper, hoofbeats loud on the hard-packed dirt of Main Street. He noticed the stairs immediately. An old man sweeping the boardwalk outside the general store paused mid-stroke. A woman hanging laundry in a side yard gathered her children closer. A boy with a fishing pole froze at the corner, wide-eyed. Cole was used to this. He looked exactly like what he was, dangerous, displaced, a wolf passing through a settlement of sheep. But then he saw her, and something in his chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt in so long. He'd almost forgotten the sensation. She stood in the doorway of the general store, framed by shadow and afternoon light, and she was looking directly at him. Not with fear, exactly, though he saw wariness in the set of her shoulders. But there was something else too. Curiosity, perhaps. Assessment. She was younger than him, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and a simple dress the color of faded cornflowers. Her face was honest and open in a way that seemed impossible to Cole, as if life hadn't yet taught her to hide. Their eyes met across the dusty street, and Cole felt the moment stretch like pulled wire. She didn't look away, didn't retreat into the store or drop her gaze the way most folks did when they caught sight of him. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him want to turn Ash around and ride back the way he'd come. But he didn't. Something, pride, stubbornness, or maybe just bone-deep weariness, kept him moving forward. He broke eye contact first, which irritated him more than it should have, and guided Ash toward the livery stable at the far end of town. The stable was run by a barrel-chested man with enormous forearms and a suspicious squint. "Help you?" he asked, not quite friendly. "Need to board my horse," Cole said, his voice rough from disuse. He'd barely spoken to another human being in 3 days. 2, maybe 3 nights. The stableman's eyes flicked over Cole's gear, the well-maintained rifle in its scabbard, the way his gun belt sat low and accessible, the hard set of his jaw. $3, he said, in advance. It was highway robbery for a town this small, but Cole didn't argue. He swung down from the saddle, pulled coins from his pocket, and counted them into the man's palm. "He needs water, feed, and a rub-down," I find him poorly treated. We'll have words." The threat was delivered quietly, but the stableman heard the iron beneath it. He nodded curtly. "Ain't in the business of mistreating animals, mister. Your horse will be fine." Cole unsaddled Ash himself, working with practiced efficiency, his hands gentle on the animal's neck. "You're a good boy," he murmured, so softly the stableman couldn't hear. "Deserve better than me dragging you from nowhere to nowhere." Ash nickered softly and nuzzled Cole's shoulder, the closest thing to affection Cole had experienced in months. With his saddlebag slung over one shoulder and his rifle cradled in the crook of his arm, Cole made his way back up Main Street toward the boarding house he'd spotted near the saloon. The sign outside read, "Mrs. Hartley's rooms, clean and respectable," in careful script. He was almost there when a voice called out behind him. "Excuse me?" Cole turned slowly, his free hand drifting instinctively toward his revolver before he caught himself. It was her, the woman from the store. Up close, she was prettier than he'd realized, with freckles scattered across her nose and eyes the warm brown of fresh-turned earth. But it was the way she carried herself that arrested him, straight-backed and certain, without the artifice he'd come to expect from town women. "Yes, ma'am?" He kept his tone neutral, respectful. Whatever this was, he didn't need trouble. "I'm Eliza Warren," she said, extending her hand as if they were meeting at a church social instead of in the dusty street. "My father and I run Warren's General Store. I wanted to welcome you to Willow Bend." Cole stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment, genuinely confused. People didn't welcome him places. They tolerated him, feared him, or tried to run him off. But this woman, Eliza, stood there with her hand extended and something like kindness in her eyes, and Cole found himself completely off balance. He shifted his rifle awkwardly and took her hand. It was warm and calloused from work, and he released it quickly, as if the contact might burn. "Cole Maddox," he said, "just passing through. Won't be any trouble." "I didn't think you would be," Eliza said, and damned if she didn't sound like she meant it. "But if you need anything while you're here, supplies, directions, a decent meal, the store is just there." She pointed back toward the building she'd emerged from. "We're open till 6 most days." Cole nodded stiffly, unsure what to do with this straightforward kindness. "Appreciate it." Eliza smiled then. A small thing, barely a curve of her lips, but it transformed her face entirely. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Maddox." She turned and walked back toward the store, her skirts raising small dust clouds with each step. Cole stood there like an idiot for a full 10 seconds, watching her go, before he shook himself and continued to the boarding house. Mrs. Hartley turned out to be a severe-looking woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Cole up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen every kind of man the frontier produced and wasn't impressed by any of them. $1.50 a night, she said before he could speak. Payment in advance. No drinking in the rooms, no women, no gambling, no firearms discharged within the building for any reason short of invasion by hostile Indians. "That happened often?" Cole asked. Mrs. Hartley's expression didn't change. "Not yet. But I like to be clear about my rules." Cole paid for 3 nights and took the key to a second-floor room that overlooked Main Street. It was small and spare. A narrow bed with a questionable mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, a single chair, and a window with thin curtains that did little to keep out the late afternoon sun. But it was clean, which was more than he'd had in some time. He dropped his saddlebags on the floor, leaned his rifle against the wall, and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The springs protested. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and let his head hang for a moment, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. He'd been running for so long. 7 years of drifting from town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots because roots meant caring and caring meant pain. After Sarah and little Emma had died, cholera, the doctor said, nothing to be done. Cole had buried something essential along with them. He'd tried to keep going, tried to be the lawman he'd trained to be, but the world had shown him its teeth. The corruption in Nebraska had been the final straw. Good men looking the other way while the sheriff took bribes from railroad barons and cattle kings. Cole had confronted him, thinking justice still meant something, and he'd been told in no uncertain terms to fall in line or get out. He'd gotten out, turned in his badge, and hadn't looked back. Since then, he'd survived on odd jobs, ranch hand, deputy in towns too small to pay well, Occasional bounty work that he hated but that paid better than honest labor. He'd become exactly what he looked like. A hard man in a hard land, moving through the world like a ghost, leaving no mark. And yet that woman, Eliza, had looked at him like he was worth welcoming. Cole stood abruptly, irritated with himself for dwelling on it. He poured water from the pitcher into the basin and splashed his face, scrubbed his hands, ran wet fingers through his hair. When he looked up at the small mirror above the washstand, a stranger stared back, hollow-eyed, grim-mouthed, old before his time. 3 days, he told his reflection. Then you're gone. The sun was setting when Cole made his way to the brass rail, drawn by hunger and the need for something stronger than water. The saloon was busier than he'd expected for a town this size. Maybe 15 men scattered among the tables, plus a bartender with magnificent mutton chops and a saloon girl who looked bored as she dealt cards to 4 cowboys. Cole took a seat at the bar, ordered whiskey and whatever food the kitchen had, and settled in to be ignored. But this was a small town, and a stranger was entertainment. "You're new," the bartender said, setting down a shot glass and pouring from a bottle of questionable provenance. "Passing through or staying?" "Passing through," Cole said automatically. "Most do. Not much here unless you're farming or ranching." The bartender was fishing, and not subtly. Cole tossed back the whiskey. It was terrible, but it burned in a familiar way, and pushed the glass forward for another. "Suits me fine." A man at the end of the bar, older and weathered, spoke up. "You got the look of a lawman about you. That true?" Cole's jaw tightened. Was. Not anymore. "What happened?" asked one of the cowboys at the card table, clearly eavesdropping. "Lost interest in hypocrisy," Cole said flatly, in a tone that invited no further questions. The bartender, sensing the conversational dead end, brought out a plate of stew and bread that was better than Cole expected. He ate methodically, keeping his back to the wall and his eyes on the room, old habits that had kept him alive. He was halfway through the meal when the door opened and a man with a badge walked in. The sheriff was in his 50s, with a lined face and calm eyes that had seen their share of trouble. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Cole and staying there. Cole kept eating. The sheriff approached slowly, casually, like he was just making his rounds. "Evening," he said. "Sheriff," Cole acknowledged without looking up. "Name's Ben Yates. I like to know who's in my town." Cole finally met his eyes. "Cole Maddox. I'll be gone in 3 days, and I'm not looking for trouble." Yates studied him for a long moment. "You carrying?" "Always." "You any good with it?" Cole's smile was thin and humorless. "Good enough that I'm still alive." Yates pulled out the stool next to Cole and sat down, which was bold considering Cole's clear desire to be left alone. "I don't get many drifters who look like they used to wear a badge. Something tells me you've got a story." "Lots of people have stories," Cole said. "Most of them aren't worth telling." "Fair enough," Yates signaled the bartender for a beer. "But I'll say this. Willow Bend is a quiet town. Good people trying to make a life. I intend to keep it that way. I'm not here to disturb your peace, Sheriff, just resting my horse and moving on." Yates nodded slowly. "I believe you. But I'm a curious man, and I recognize the look in your eyes. You've seen things, done things, and you're running from something, probably yourself." Cole's hand tightened on his spoon, but his voice stayed level. "With respect, Sheriff, my past is my own." "It is," Yates agreed, "until it follows you somewhere and becomes someone else's problem. I'm just letting you know I'll be watching, not because I think you're trouble, but because I can't afford to assume you're not." It was fair, and Cole respected the directness. "Understood." Yates finished his beer in silence, then stood and tipped his hat. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Maddox, and if you get bored in the next 3 days, my office is across from the bank, always looking for a man who knows which end of a gun to point." Cole said nothing, and Yates left. The rest of the evening passed in blessed anonymity. Cole finished his meal, had 2 more whiskeys, and returned to the boarding house as full dark settled over the town. In his room, he stripped to his undershirt and trousers, checked his weapons out of habit, and lay down on the narrow bed. Sleep didn't come easily. It never did. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams, Sarah's face, Emma's laughter, the smell of sickness and death. The sheriff in Nebraska counting bribe money while Cole stood in the doorway deciding whether to draw his gun or walk away. He woke before dawn, sweating despite the cool air, and sat at the window watching Willow Bend come to life. Lanterns flickered on in windows. A rooster crowed somewhere. A wagon creaked past loaded with hay. Ordinary people doing ordinary things, building lives that mattered. Cole felt like a stain on the landscape. He washed, dressed, and went downstairs. Mrs. Hartley had breakfast available: eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee that could strip paint. And Cole ate alone at a small table in the boarding house dining room. He was planning his day, check on Ash, maybe ride out and scout the area, kill time until he could justify leaving, when Mrs. Hartley appeared at his elbow. "The Warren girl asked if you'd be coming by the store today," she said without preamble. Cole looked up, surprised. "Why?" Mrs. Hartley shrugged. "Didn't say. Just asked me to pass the message if I saw you." This complicated things. Cole's instinct was to avoid the store entirely, avoid Eliza Warren and her inexplicable kindness, avoid anything that might make him reconsider the walls he'd built. But small-town politeness was a trap. If he ignored the invitation, it would be noticed, remarked upon, remembered. "I'll stop by," he said, more curtly than he intended. Mrs. Hartley sniffed. "See that you do. Eliza's a good girl. Her mother died when she was young, and she's been running that store with her father ever since. Town looks after her." It was both information and warning. Don't hurt this woman we care about. Cole finished his breakfast and stepped out into the morning. The air was crisp and clean, the sky enormous and blue. He made his way to the livery first, where he found Ash well-fed and content. The stableman nodded at him but didn't speak, which suited Cole fine. With no more excuses, Cole walked slowly toward Warren's general store. It was a tidy building with large windows displaying goods, bolts of fabric, canned foods, tools, sundries. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Warren's, established 1871. Cole pushed open the door, and a bell chimed cheerfully above his head. The interior was organized and well-stocked, shelves lined with everything a frontier community might need, from flour and sugar to nails and rope. The smell of coffee and leather and something sweet hung in the air. And there, behind the main counter, was Eliza Warren. She looked up at the bell's chime and smiled, that same small, transforming smile from yesterday. "Mr. Maddox, good morning." "Ma'am." Cole removed his hat automatically, a gesture of respect drilled into him long ago. "Mrs. Hartley said you asked about me." "I did." Eliza set down the ledger she'd been writing in. "I wanted to invite you to our harvest social on Saturday evening. The whole town will be there. Food, music, dancing. It's a tradition." Cole stared at her. "You're inviting me to a social." "I am." "Why?" The question came out more bluntly than he'd intended, but Eliza didn't seem offended. "Because you're new in town, and it's a welcoming thing to do. And because—" she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Because you looked like you could use some kindness." Something in Cole's chest cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to hurt. He wanted to refuse, to walk out, to maintain the careful distance that kept him safe. But Eliza was looking at him with those honest eyes, and he found he couldn't form the words. "I'm not much for dancing," he said instead. "Neither am I, really," Eliza admitted with a small laugh. "But the food is usually excellent, and it's a chance to meet people. If you're going to be here a few days anyway, you might as well know who your neighbors are." "I'm leaving Sunday," Cole said, making it clear. "Then you'll have a pleasant memory to take with you." Before Cole could formulate another objection, the door opened and a man entered, 50s, bespectacled, with the same honest eyes as Eliza. "Morning, sweetheart," he said to her, then noticed Cole. "Oh. Hello. Pa, this is Mr. Cole Maddox," Eliza said. "Mr. Maddox, this is my father, Thomas Warren." Thomas extended his hand and Cole shook it. The older man had a firm grip and a measuring gaze. "Pleasure," Thomas said. "You're the gentleman who rode in yesterday. Staying long?" "Just passing through." "Well, you're welcome here as long as you're in town. Eliza's been telling me she invited you to the social." Cole glanced at Eliza, who looked slightly embarrassed. Clearly she'd been advocating for him. "She did," Cole said. I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to impose. Nonsense, Thomas said. The social's for everyone. Besides, we could use an extra pair of hands setting up tables and such. You look like a man who knows how to work. Cole recognized the tactic. Give him a job, make him useful, pull him into the community. Part of him resented the manipulation. The other part, the part that had been so lonely for so long, felt something dangerously close to gratitude. I suppose I could help set up, Cole heard himself say. Eliza's face lit up, and Cole had to look away from the brightness of it. Wonderful. The setup starts Saturday afternoon at the church grounds. You can't miss it. I'll be there. He bought a few supplies he didn't really need, coffee, jerky, a new bandana, just to justify the visit, and left the store feeling oddly unsettled. He'd come to Willow Bend to rest for a few days and disappear. He hadn't planned on being welcomed, hadn't planned on Eliza Warren and her stubborn kindness. As he walked back toward the boarding house, Sheriff Yates appeared from his office, coffee cup in hand. Morning, Maddox? Settling in? As much as I need to. I hear Eliza roped you into the harvest social. Yates smiled slightly. She's got a gift for that, seeing the good in people, bringing them into the fold whether they want to be or not. I can leave if it's a problem. Didn't say it was a problem, just making an observation. Yates sipped his coffee. You know, I meant what I said last night about needing help. Town this size, I'm sheriff, deputy, and half the time the judge, too. Gets overwhelming. I'm sure you manage. I do. But having someone with experience around, even temporarily, wouldn't hurt. Pays not much, but it's something. Think about it. Cole had no intention of thinking about it. Taking a job meant staying, and staying meant caring, and caring meant pain. He'd learned that lesson too well to forget it now. But as he spent the rest of the day restlessly wandering the town, watching the blacksmith work, sitting by the creek that ran along Willow Bend's eastern edge, helping a farmer whose wagon had lost a wheel, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting inside him. That night, back in his room, Cole sat by the window and watched the stars emerge. The prairie night was vast and quiet, broken only by distant coyote calls and the occasional bark of a dog. He thought about Sarah and Emma, about the life he'd lost, about the man he'd been before grief hollowed him out. And he thought about Eliza Warren, who'd looked at him, a dangerous stranger with dead eyes and a gun on his hip, and decided he was worth welcoming. It scared him more than any gunfight ever had. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth and cloudless skies, perfect weather for the harvest social. Cole had spent the intervening days in a state of low-grade anxiety, debating whether to simply saddle Ash and ride out early, skip the whole affair, maintain his solitude. But he'd given his word, and whatever else Cole Maddox had lost, he still had that. He arrived at the church grounds around 2 o'clock to find organized chaos. Long tables were being set up under a grove of cottonwood trees. Women were arranging tablecloths and centerpieces. Men were building a platform for musicians. Children ran everywhere, getting underfoot and being shooed away with affectionate exasperation. Eliza spotted him immediately and waved him over. She wore a different dress today, green with small white flowers, and her hair was braided and pinned up in a style that made her look younger. Mr. Maddox, perfect timing. We need help moving the heavy tables from the church basement. For the next 2 hours, Cole worked alongside Thomas Warren and half a dozen other men, hauling tables and benches, stringing lanterns in the trees, setting up the musicians' platform. The work was simple and physical, and Cole fell into the rhythm of it, his body grateful for clear tasks. The men he worked with were friendly but not intrusive. They introduced themselves: Sam the blacksmith, Jacob, who ran the feed store, Michael, who farmed wheat north of town. And they didn't press Cole for information he didn't offer. Instead, they talked about crops and weather and the new railroad spur being planned 50 miles south. Cole found it pleasant, disturbingly so. By 5 o'clock, the grounds were transformed. Tables laden with food stretched beneath the trees: roasted chickens, fresh bread, pies, preserves, vegetables from late gardens. The lanterns glowed softly as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The musicians, a fiddler, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica, were tuning their instruments. People arrived in their Sunday best, families and couples and solitary folk, all greeting each other with the easy familiarity of neighbors who'd weathered hard seasons together. Cole stood at the edge of the gathering, feeling simultaneously invisible and conspicuous. Then Eliza was at his elbow, carrying 2 plates of food. "You worked hard. Come eat." She led him to a table slightly removed from the main cluster, and they sat. Cole realized he was famished. He'd barely eaten all day, and he dug into the chicken and potatoes with barely restrained hunger. "You're a hard worker," Eliza observed, picking at her own food. Pa was impressed. Cole shrugged. "Just tables and benches." "Still, you didn't have to help. You could have just shown up for the food." "Gave my word." Eliza smiled at that. "That matters to you." "It's about all I have left that does." The words came out before Cole could stop them. Too honest, too revealing. He cursed himself silently and focused on his plate. But Eliza didn't press. Instead, she said quietly, "I think you have more than you realize." Before Cole could respond, the music started, a lively reel that had people moving toward the makeshift dance floor. Couples formed up, laughter rang out, and the social truly began. Cole watched from the safety of the table, content to observe. But Eliza had other ideas. "Dance with me," she said. Cole nearly choked on his coffee. "I told you I don't dance." "You told me you're not much for dancing. That's different than not dancing at all." She stood and extended her hand, echoing that first meeting in the street. "One dance, Mr. Maddox. I promise not to judge your footwork." Cole wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse. But Eliza stood there with her hand outstretched and hope in her eyes. And Cole found himself standing, taking her hand, allowing himself to be led to the dance floor. The fiddle was playing something quick and cheerful, and Cole stumbled through the steps, acutely aware of his awkwardness. But Eliza was patient, laughing when he stepped on her foot, guiding him through turns with gentle pressure on his shoulder. And then, impossibly, he found the rhythm. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The joy of music and movement, of being close to another person without it meaning danger or loss. Eliza's hand was warm in his, her eyes bright with pleasure, and for 3 minutes Cole Maddox forgot to be afraid. When the song ended, they were both slightly breathless. Eliza squeezed his hand once before releasing it. "See? You survived." "Barely," Cole said, but he was almost smiling. They returned to their table, and Eliza was immediately claimed by other dance partners. She was clearly popular, clearly loved by this community. Cole watched her spin and laugh with other men, and he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not jealousy, exactly. More like longing. For a life where he could be one of those men, untroubled and present, worthy of a woman like Eliza Warren. Sheriff Yates appeared at Cole's side, 2 glasses of cider in hand. He offered one to Cole and sat down uninvited. "She's something, isn't she?" Cole accepted the cider but didn't answer. "Eliza's the heart of this town," Yates continued. "After her mother died, consumption 7 years back, she could have left, could have gone somewhere with more opportunities. But she stayed, helped her father, took care of people. We're better for having her." "Why are you telling me this?" Cole asked. Yates met his eyes. "Because I see the way you look at her. And I see the way she looks at you. And I'm telling you, as someone who cares about that girl like a daughter, that if you're just passing through, you'd best keep your distance. She deserves better than another ghost in her life." The words stung because they were true. Cole set down his cider carefully. "I don't intend to hurt her. Intentions don't mean much if the result's the same. You strike me as a man running from something. Fine. We've all got our demons, but don't let Eliza become collateral damage." Yates stood and walked away, leaving Cole alone with thoughts that circled like vultures. The social continued late into the night. At some point, Cole found himself helping clean up, stacking plates, folding tablecloths, dismantling tables, working alongside the same people who'd built everything that afternoon. They thanked him with casual warmth, as if he belonged. By the time everything was packed away, it was past midnight. Most families had taken their children home. Only a handful of people remained, including Eliza and Thomas Warren. Eliza approached Cole as he was preparing to leave. "Thank you for coming. And for helping. It meant a lot." "It was nice," Cole admitted, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. "Will you come by the store before you leave?" Eliza asked. I'd like to say a proper goodbye." Cole nodded, not trusting his voice. As he walked back to the boarding house through the quiet streets, Cole felt the weight of Yates's words pressing on him. The sheriff was right. Cole was a man running from his past, haunted by loss, convinced he didn't deserve peace or happiness. Getting close to Eliza would only hurt her when he inevitably left. And yet, that one dance, the warmth of her hand, the sound of her laughter. For 3 minutes, Cole had felt alive again. In his room, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his saddlebags, already packed, ready to go. He could leave at first light, skip the goodbye, ride out clean, protect them both from whatever damage his presence might cause. But even as he thought it, Cole knew he wouldn't. He'd promised Eliza a goodbye, and his words still mattered. Outside, the prairie night sang its ancient song, wind and distance and stars. And Cole Maddox, hollow-eyed and broken, realized with growing dread that he wasn't ready to leave Willowbend. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And that terrified him more than any bullet he'd ever faced. Sunday morning arrived with clouds gathering on the horizon, heavy and gray as old bruises. Cole woke before dawn from dreams that left him gasping. Sarah's face dissolving into Eliza's. Emma's small hand reaching for him through smoke he could never quite escape. He lay in the narrow bed listening to his own heartbeat slow, watching shadows shift across the ceiling until the first pale light crept through the thin curtains. He should have been gone by now. That was the plan. 3 days maximum, then disappear like he always did. But instead, he found himself washing carefully at the basin, shaving for the first time since arriving, changing into his cleanest shirt. His reflection in the small mirror looked marginally more human, though the hollowness in his eyes remained. The boarding house dining room was empty except for Mrs. Hartley, who poured him coffee without comment and set down a plate of eggs and toast. She watched him eat with an expression that might have been approval or might have been suspicion. With Mrs. Hartley, it was hard to tell. "You staying on, then?" she asked finally. Cole's hand paused halfway to his mouth. "Haven't decided. Town could use a man like you. Ben Yates isn't getting any younger, and his deputy quit last month to try his luck in the gold fields." Mrs. Hartley refilled his coffee cup. "But I suppose that's not my business." "No, ma'am, it's not." "Eliza Warren is a fine girl," Mrs. Hartley continued, completely ignoring his hint. "Deserves a good man who'll stay put, not some drifter who'll break her heart come spring." Cole set down his fork carefully. "I've made no promises to Miss Warren." "Don't need to promise. She sees something in you, plain as day. Question is whether you're brave enough to let her." The words hit harder than they should have. Cole finished his breakfast in silence and left without responding, his jaw tight with irritation and something that felt uncomfortably like shame. The streets of Willowbend were quiet on this Sunday morning, most folks either still sleeping off the harvest social or preparing for church services. Cole made his way to the livery, where he found Ash contentedly munching hay. The horse lifted his head at Cole's approach and nickered softly. "Morning, boy," Cole murmured, running a hand down the gray's neck. "You're probably ready to get back on the trail, aren't you?" Ash nudged his shoulder, looking for treats Cole didn't have. "I know. I'm getting soft." Cole leaned his forehead against the horse's warm neck for a moment, breathing in the familiar smell of animal and hay and leather. "We should leave. You know that, right? Staying is dangerous. Carrying is dangerous." But even as he said it, Cole knew he was trying to convince himself, and failing. The stableman appeared from the back room, yawning. "Help you, Maddox?" "Just checking on my horse. How much do I owe you if I stay another week?" The words were out before Cole fully realized he'd decided. The stableman quoted a price, Cole paid it, and just like that, his departure was postponed. The relief that flooded through him was almost nauseating in its intensity. He spent the next hour walking the perimeter of town, ostensibly scouting but really just thinking. The clouds overhead were darkening, and the wind carried the smell of coming rain. Storm season was late this year, the stableman had mentioned, but when it came, it would come hard. Cole found himself at the creek that ran along Willowbend's eastern edge, the same spot he'd visited days ago. The water was low this time of year, barely a trickle over smooth stones. He sat on the bank and watched leaves spiral past, his mind churning. What was he doing? One dance with a pretty woman, and suddenly he was extending his stay, shaving like a civilized man, considering, however briefly, the possibility of stopping. It was insanity. Nothing had changed about who he was or what he'd lost. The past didn't vanish just because a shopkeeper's daughter smiled at him. And yet, that moment on the dance floor, Eliza's hand warm in his, the music lifting something inside him he'd thought was dead, that had been real. More real than anything Cole had felt in 7 years of running. "Thought I might find you here." Cole's hand went to his gun before he recognized Sheriff Yates's voice. The older man was approaching through the cottonwoods, moving with the careful gait of someone whose knees complained on damp mornings. "Sheriff," Cole said, relaxing slightly, "you tracking me?" In a manner of speaking, Yates settled onto a fallen log nearby with a soft grunt. "I make it my business to know where armed strangers spend their time, especially armed strangers who look like they're wrestling with important decisions." "Who says I'm armed?" Yates gave him a look. "Please, you've got at least 2 weapons on you right now, probably 3. Man like you feels naked without steel." Cole almost smiled. "Fair enough." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the creek burble and the wind rustle through dying leaves. Finally, Yates spoke. "I was hard on you last night, probably harder than was warranted." Cole glanced at him, surprised. "You were protecting someone you care about. I respect that. Still, I made some assumptions about your character that might not be fair. Truth is, I don't know your story. Don't know what you've survived or what you're running from." Yates picked up a stone and tossed it into the creek. "But I recognize pain when I see it. You've got the look of a man who's lost something he can't get back." Cole's throat tightened. He said nothing. "I lost my wife 8 years ago," Yates continued quietly. "Childbirth. Baby didn't make it either. For a long time after that, I just existed. Went through the motions of being sheriff because I didn't know what else to do. Thought I'd never feel anything again except empty." "What changed?" Cole asked, his voice rough. "Time, mostly. And this town. These people who insisted on caring about me even when I wanted to be left alone." Yates smiled slightly. "Point is, sometimes the thing you're running from isn't behind you. It's inside you, and running doesn't make it any smaller." Cole looked at the sheriff then, really looked at him, and saw a kindred spirit, another man who'd survived loss and learned to live again. It should have been encouraging. Instead, it scared him. "I don't know if I can do what you're suggesting," Cole said. "Which is?" "Stay, put down roots, let people matter again." "Nobody's suggesting anything," Yates said. "I'm just saying you've got a choice. You can keep drifting, keep that wall up, die alone somewhere in a town that won't remember your name. Or you can take a risk, see what happens if you stop running long enough to let someone in. And if it all falls apart? If I lose?" Cole couldn't finish the sentence. "Then you'll hurt, badly, same as before." Yates stood slowly, his knees popping. "But at least you'll have lived first. At least you'll have tried." He walked away, leaving Cole alone with the creek and his thoughts, and the weight of decisions he wasn't ready to make. By noon, the clouds had opened up, and rain fell in sheets across the prairie. Cole made his way to Warren's general store, water streaming from his hat brim, his boots squelching on the boardwalk. The bell chimed as he entered, and Eliza looked up from behind the counter, her face breaking into that smile that made something in Cole's chest ache. "Mr. Maddox, I was beginning to think you'd left without saying goodbye." "Thought crossed my mind," Cole admitted, removing his hat and trying ineffectually to shake off the water. "But I gave my word. Come in properly. You're soaked." Eliza disappeared into the back room and returned with a towel. "Dry off before you catch your death." Cole accepted the towel and wiped his face and hands, acutely aware of the water he was dripping on her clean floor. The store was warm and dry, a fire crackling in the pot-bellied stove in the corner. The smell of coffee mixed with the scent of rain and merchandise. "Where's your father?" Cole asked. "Church services, then lunch with the widow Simmons. He'll be gone most of the afternoon." Eliza poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot on the stove and brought them to the counter. "I don't go to services much anymore. Pa says I'm being stubborn, but I figure God and I can have our conversations without needing the whole town watching." It was the most personal thing she'd shared with him, and Cole found himself curious despite his better judgment. You have a falling out with the Almighty? More like a disagreement about fairness. Eliza wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, her eyes distant. My mother was the kindest woman you'd ever meet. Never spoke ill of anyone, always helping, always giving. When she got sick, consumption, took her slow over 2 years, I prayed harder than I'd ever prayed for anything. Asked God to spare her, to let her stay with us. But she died anyway. And I had to watch Pa try to be both parents while running this store and pretending his heart wasn't broken. I'm sorry, Cole said, the words inadequate but genuine. It was 7 years ago. I've made my peace mostly, but I stopped believing in a God who'd take someone that good and leave the cruel and wicked to prosper. Eliza's eyes refocused on Cole. I suppose that sounds bitter. It sounds honest. Cole sipped his coffee, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. I lost my wife and daughter to cholera, also 7 years ago. Also prayed for God to spare them. He didn't listen to me either. The words came out flat, practiced, but Eliza's face softened with understanding rather than pity. 7 years. That's a long time to carry grief alone. Seemed easier than the alternative. Which is? Letting someone close enough to lose again. Eliza was quiet for a moment, studying him with those earth-brown eyes. Then she said softly, That's not living, Mr. Maddox. That's just surviving. There's a difference. Cole, he said suddenly, if we're sharing losses and questioning God, you should probably call me Cole. Her smile returned, small but genuine. Cole, then. And I'm Eliza, not Miss Warren. Eliza, tsit, he repeated, and the name felt significant in his mouth, like a commitment he wasn't sure he was ready to make. They talked through the afternoon while rain hammered the roof and turned Main Street into a river of mud. Cole found himself sharing things he'd never spoken aloud. The corruption in Nebraska that had driven him from law work, the aimless years that followed, the growing certainty that he was meant to be alone. Eliza listened without judgment, offering her own stories in return. Her mother's illness, the loneliness of being the only young woman in a town full of families and older folks, her dreams of maybe traveling someday, but never quite being able to leave her father. Why haven't you married? Cole asked, then immediately regretted the forwardness. I'm sorry, that's not my business. It's all right. Truth is, I haven't found anyone who sees me as anything more than Thomas Warren's helpful daughter or a potential housekeeper. Men in frontier towns tend to want wives for practical reasons, not— She trailed off, searching for words. Not for who you actually are, Cole finished. Exactly. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, the same feeling as that first moment in the street. Cole looked away first, his heart hammering. I paid for another week at the livery, he said abruptly, if you and your father still need help around the store. Eliza's face lit up with pleasure that made Cole's chest tighten. We absolutely do. Pa's been putting off organizing the stockroom for months, and the inventory needs updating before winter. If you're serious, I'm serious. Then you're hired. We can't pay much, but it's something. Don't need much, Cole said. And it was true. His needs had shrunk over the years to almost nothing. Food, shelter, a place to stable ash. Everything else was just weight to carry. The rain eased by late afternoon, and Cole helped Eliza close up the store. As they worked, he found himself noticing small things. The efficient way she moved through familiar space, the care she took arranging displays, the little smile she gave when she thought he wasn't looking. This was her domain, and she was good at it. As they finished, Thomas Warren appeared at the door, shaking rain from his coat. Well now, this is a pleasant surprise. Cole, I didn't expect to see you still in town. I've decided to stay on a bit, Cole said, if the offer of work still stands. Thomas's face broke into a broad smile. Absolutely it does. When can you start? Tomorrow morning? Perfect. Come around 8. We'll get you set up proper. Walking back to the boarding house through the muddy streets, Cole felt something unfamiliar settling over him. Anticipation, maybe, or purpose. It felt dangerous and fragile, like holding a bird with a broken wing. Mrs. Hartley took his extended stay in stride, merely adjusting his bill and reminding him of house rules as if she'd known all along he wouldn't leave on schedule. Cole ate supper in the dining room with 2 other boarders, a traveling salesman and a young schoolteacher new to town. and found the conversation less grating than usual. That night, sleep came easier than it had in months. When Sarah and Emma appeared in his dreams, they felt less like accusation and more like memory, still painful, but no longer crushing. The next week passed in a rhythm Cole hadn't experienced since before his life fell apart. He arrived at Warren's General Store each morning at 8, working alongside Thomas and Eliza. The stockroom was indeed a disaster, years of accumulated goods in no particular order. Cole tackled it methodically, building new shelving, organizing inventory, creating systems that made sense. Thomas proved to be excellent company, knowledgeable about people and merchandise, with a dry wit and no pressure to make conversation when silence felt more comfortable. He treated Cole as an equal, not a charity case or a curiosity. But it was Eliza who occupied Cole's thoughts more than was wise. They worked together often, and Cole found himself learning her patterns, the way she hummed softly when concentrating, how she always put the customer's needs above the sale, the fierce pride she took in keeping the store immaculate. She was smart and capable and kind without being soft, and Cole began to understand why this town loved her. He was also beginning to understand that he was in serious trouble where she was concerned. On Wednesday afternoon, a woman came into the store with 2 small children, a boy about 5 and a girl no more than 3. The little girl had dark curls and bright eyes, and when she smiled at Cole, he felt his chest seize. She looked so much like Emma that for a moment he couldn't breathe. Eliza noticed immediately. As soon as the family left, she touched his arm gently. "Are you all right?" Cole nodded, not trusting his voice. "The little girl, she reminded you of your daughter." It wasn't a question. Cole swallowed hard. Her name was Emma. She would have been 8 this year. Dark hair like her mother, but my eyes. She loved horses and stories and making daisy chains. The words poured out before he could stop them. "I never talk about her. It hurts too much." "Talking about her means she was real," Eliza said quietly. "Means she mattered. Isn't that better than silence?" Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw not pity, but understanding. Eliza knew loss too. Maybe not the same shape as his, but she knew the weight of it, the way it reshaped everything. "She mattered," he said roughly. "They both mattered, and I couldn't save them." "That wasn't your fault." "It doesn't make it easier." Eliza squeezed his arm once, then let go. "No, it doesn't. But you're still here, Cole. You survived. Maybe that means something. Maybe it just means I'm too stubborn to die. Or maybe it means you still have living left to do." By Friday, word had spread that Cole was sticking around, at least temporarily. People nodded to him on the street, called him by name. Sam the blacksmith asked if he could help shoe Ash, who was apparently getting opinionated about his hooves. Jacob from the feed store invited him to join a card game Saturday night. Small gestures, but they accumulated into something that felt dangerously like belonging. Sheriff Yates stopped by the store Friday afternoon with news that made the hairs on Cole's neck stand up. "Got a telegram from the marshal in Dodge City," Yates said, his expression grim. "The Marlowe gang hit a bank in Kinsley 2 days ago, killed a teller and a deputy. They're heading south, which means they might pass through here." Cole felt his body shift automatically into readiness, old instincts flooding back. "How many?" 4 men, brothers Jake and Frank Marlowe, plus 2 others, Pete Dawson and someone called Nevada Red. "They're vicious, Cole. Not just thieves. They enjoy the killing." Thomas's face had gone pale. "Will they hit Willow Bend?" "Hard to say. We don't have enough money to make it worth their while, but sometimes these types rob for sport, or because they need supplies, or just because they can." Yates turned to Cole. "I'm deputizing men I trust. You're at the top of my list." Cole's first instinct was to refuse. Getting involved meant commitment, meant putting himself in harm's way for people he'd sworn not to care about. But then he thought about Eliza behind the counter of this store, about Thomas and Mrs. Hartley and the children who played in the streets, and he heard himself say, "What do you need me to do?" Relief flooded Yates's face. "Meet me at my office tonight. I'm gathering everyone at 8. We need to make plans." After the sheriff left, Thomas turned to Cole. "You don't have to do this. You're not beholden to this town." "I know. But you're going to help anyway." "I am." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." Eliza had been quiet during the exchange, but now she spoke, her voice tight with worry. These men, they're really as dangerous as Ben says? Probably worse, Cole said honestly. Men like that, they've crossed a line. Violence becomes easier each time. They stop seeing people as people. Have you, Eliza hesitated, have you ever had to kill someone? Cole met her eyes. Yes. More than once. All of them were trying to kill me or someone I was protecting, but yes. He waited for her to recoil, to look at him differently, to realize what he actually was beneath the cleanup and the helpfulness. Instead, Eliza said, "Then I'm glad you'll be standing between them and this town." The trust in her voice was almost unbearable. That evening, Cole joined Yates and 8 other men at the sheriff's office. He recognized most of them: Sam the blacksmith, Jacob from the feed store, 2 ranchers whose spreads bordered town, the saloon owner, and 3 others who looked capable. They were armed and grim-faced, citizen defenders preparing to protect what was theirs. Yates spread a map of the town on his desk. If the Marlows come through, they'll likely hit the bank first. It's the obvious target, but they might also raid the store for supplies or the saloon for liquor. We need to cover multiple locations and be ready to respond quickly. For the next 2 hours, they planned. Cole found himself slipping back into old patterns, thinking tactically, identifying sightlines and defensive positions, suggesting strategies based on years of experience. The other men listened, recognizing competence when they heard it. "You've done this before," Sam observed. "Too many times," Cole said. "And I'll tell you now, if they come, some of us might not walk away. These men are professionals. They're faster and meaner than you're expecting. If you have doubts, it's better to say so now." No one spoke up. Whatever Willowbend lacked in experience, it made up for in stubborn courage. They agreed to establish watch rotations starting immediately. 2-man teams would monitor the roads into town around the clock until either the Marlows passed by or the threat ended. Cole volunteered for the midnight to dawn shift, partnered with Jacob. As the meeting broke up, Yates pulled Cole aside. "You're good at this. Natural leader. You were a deputy before, you said?" "Lawman in Missouri for 3 years. Deputy in Nebraska for 2 more before I couldn't stomach the corruption." "What made you leave Missouri?" Cole's jaw tightened. "My family died while I was chasing a horse thief 50 miles away. Came home to find them already buried. I blame myself for not being there, and I couldn't keep wearing the badge in a town that reminded me of them every day." Yates was quiet for a moment. "That's a heavy load." "It is. But it's mine." "Cole, I'm going to say something and I need you to really hear it. What happened to your family? That was tragedy, not failure. You couldn't have prevented cholera. Being there might have meant you died too. Or it might have meant I could have gotten them help faster. I'll never know." "Exactly. You'll never know. So at some point, you have to decide to stop punishing yourself for a decision that might not have changed anything." Yates put a hand on Cole's shoulder. "You've got a chance here, a real chance, to be more than your past. Don't waste it." Cole walked back to the boarding house under a sky full of stars, Yates's words circling his mind like buzzards. Maybe the sheriff was right. Maybe Cole had been punishing himself for 7 years, turning grief into a weapon he used against his own heart. Or maybe he was just realistic about what he deserved. The weekend passed in tense watchfulness. Cole pulled his watch shifts, scanning the prairie for dust clouds that might signal riders. Nothing appeared. During daylight hours, he worked at the store, but the atmosphere had changed. People spoke in hushed tones, moved a little quicker, kept weapons closer. Eliza tried to maintain normalcy, but Cole saw the strain in her eyes. On Sunday afternoon, when the store was quiet, she finally asked, "What happens if they come?" "We fight," Cole said simply. "We make it not worth their while to stick around." "And if that doesn't work?" "Then we pray we're better shots than they are." Eliza was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know how to use a rifle. Pa taught me after Ma died. If it comes to fighting, I won't hide." "Eliza, no. This is my home, Cole. My father's store. I'm not going to cower while good men risk their lives." Her chin came up stubbornly. "Besides, you might need all the guns you can get." Cole wanted to argue, to insist she stay somewhere safe, But he recognized the futility. Eliza Warren was made of sterner stuff than her gentle demeanor suggested. "Stay behind cover," he said finally, "and if I tell you to run, you run. Promise me." "I promise. If you promise to be careful." "I'm always careful." "No, you're always ready to die protecting others. That's different than being careful." Eliza reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I need you to come back, Cole. After all this, I need you to be all right." The vulnerability in her voice cracked something inside him. Cole looked down at their joined hands, hers small and calloused from work, his scarred and rough, and felt the walls he'd built so carefully begin to crumble. "Eliza, I'm not—" He struggled for words. "I'm not a good bet. I'm broken in ways that don't fix. Getting close to me, caring about me, it'll only end in hurt." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you're not as broken as you think. Maybe you just need someone willing to believe in you until you can believe in yourself." "Why me?" Cole asked, the question raw. "Why would you take that risk?" "Because I see you, Cole Maddox. Not the drifter, not the gunman, not the grief. I see the man who helps elderly customers carry their purchases home, who spent an entire afternoon fixing Mrs. Chen's wagon wheel for no payment, who steps between danger and people he barely knows." Eliza squeezed his hand. "You're good, Cole. Even if you don't believe it yet." Cole's throat was tight. He wanted to argue, to list all the reasons she was wrong, to protect her from the disappointment she'd inevitably feel when she realized what he actually was. But the hope in her eyes paralyzed him. "The Marlowe gang comes through. I'm going to be in the thick of it," he said instead. I won't stand back while people die." "I know. That's part of who you are." "I might not survive it." "Then we'd better make the most of whatever time we have." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Brief, chaste, but it burned like a brand. Cole stood frozen as she stepped back, his heart hammering, his carefully constructed defenses in ruins. "Come to dinner tonight," Eliza said. "Pa's making his famous stew, and he'd enjoy the company. So would I." "Eliza? Just dinner, Cole. Between friends. Say yes." Cole knew he should refuse, should maintain distance, should protect them both from the inevitable pain of attachment. But he was so tired of being alone, so tired of punishing himself, so tired of running from the only thing that had made him feel alive in 7 years. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'd like that." Eliza's smile could have lit the entire prairie. That evening, sitting in the Warren family quarters above the store, eating Thomas's surprisingly excellent stew and listening to Eliza and her father trade stories about the town's history, Cole felt something settle inside him. This was what he'd lost. Not just Sarah and Emma specifically, but this feeling of belonging, of being part of something larger than his own pain. Thomas regaled them with tales of Willow Bend's early days, when it was just 3 families and a trading post. Eliza told embarrassing stories about her teenage years when she'd tried to prove she could rope cattle as well as any boy and had ended up in the creek. Cole found himself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "You should do that more often," Eliza observed. "What?" "Laugh. It suits you." Later, as Cole was preparing to leave, Thomas shook his hand firmly. "I'm glad you're staying, son. Willow Bend's better with you in it." The word son hit Cole like a gut punch. He managed to thank Thomas and make his goodbyes without his voice breaking, but walking back to the boarding house, he felt tears burning behind his eyes. He'd come to Willow Bend expecting nothing and planning to leave quickly. Instead, he'd found people who insisted on caring about him, on seeing value he no longer believed he possessed. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. That night, lying in his narrow bed, Cole made a decision. If the Marlowe gang came through, he would fight with everything he had to protect this town and these people who'd somehow become his people. And if he survived, if he somehow made it through the coming storm, he would stay. He would let Eliza's kindness reach him. He would try to be the man she seemed to think he was. It was the most frightening decision Cole had made since choosing to keep breathing after Sarah and Emma died. But maybe Yates was right. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start living again. Maybe Eliza was worth the risk of caring. Maybe he was worth saving after all. The watch continued through Monday and Tuesday with no sign of the Marlowes. Some folks began to hope the gang had taken a different route. Cole knew better. Men like that were unpredictable, and the threat wouldn't end until they were caught or killed. On Tuesday afternoon, as Cole was restocking shelves, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A rider had come in fast from the west, his horse lathered with sweat. Cole's blood chilled. He knew, with the certainty of instinct, what was coming. The rider dismounted and ran straight to the sheriff's office. Within minutes, the church bell was ringing, the agreed signal for danger. Cole exchanged a look with Eliza, then with Thomas. "It's them," Cole said quietly. "Get your rifle and stay inside. Lock the doors." "Where are you going?" Eliza asked, fear sharp in her voice. Cole checked his revolver, his movements practiced and efficient. "To do what I do best." He kissed her forehead, quick, impulsive, terrifying, and ran out into the street where Sheriff Yates was already rallying defenders. The Marlowe gang was less than an hour away, riding hard for Willow Bend. And Cole Maddox, who'd spent 7 years trying not to care about anything, suddenly had everything to lose. The street had transformed into controlled chaos. Women hurried children indoors, while men ran toward predetermined positions, rifles and shotguns in hand. Cole reached Yates just as the sheriff was issuing rapid-fire orders to the assembled defenders. "Sam, Jacob, take the roof of the Mercantile, gives you clear sight lines down Main Street. Michael, you and your brother cover the bank from inside, second-floor windows. Everyone else, spread out but stay within shouting distance." Yates's voice was steady, betraying none of the fear Cole could see in his eyes. "Remember what we talked about. Don't fire unless they fire first. Maybe they'll just ride through." "They won't," Cole said quietly, checking his ammunition. He had 30 rounds for his Colt, plus the rifle. Not enough if this went bad, but it would have to do. Men like this, they smell fear. Town this scared, they'll push just to see what happens. Then we make sure they regret it. Yates handed Cole a deputy's badge. "Make it official. Your law in Willow Bend now." Cole stared at the tin star, feeling its weight in ways that had nothing to do with metal. He'd sworn he'd never wear a badge again, never put himself in that position of responsibility and inevitable failure. But Eliza was in the store behind him. Thomas was loading a shotgun with shaking hands, and Mrs. Hartley was herding her boarders into the cellar with fierce determination. He pinned the badge to his shirt. "Where do you want me?" Cole asked. "With me. Main Street. Centered. We're the first line." Yates's expression was grim. "If shooting starts, we try to end it fast. Don't let them dig in." Cole nodded. He'd been in firefights before, as a lawman, as a deputy, once as an unwilling participant when he'd stumbled into a range war. He knew the sick feeling in his stomach, the way time would seem to stretch and compress simultaneously, the copper taste of fear mixed with adrenaline. But this was different. This time he had something to lose beyond his own life. The rider who'd brought the warning, a teenage boy from a farm west of town, was gulping water and trying to catch his breath. "4 of them," he gasped out between swallows. "Riding hard. They stopped at our place, took food and whiskey. Pa tried to stop them, and one of them, big man with a scar, hit him with a rifle butt. Said they were coming here for the bank, and anyone who got in their way would die." "Your father all right?" Yates asked. "Yes, sir. Mad as hell but alive. Ma's tending to him." "You did good, son. Now get off the street and stay down." The boy ran toward the church where non-combatants were gathering. Cole watched him go and thought of Emma, wondered what she would have looked like as a teenager, whether she'd have been brave or cautious or both. No time for that now. He pushed the thought away and focused. Main Street stretched before them, dusty and empty in the afternoon sun. The buildings on either side provided cover and firing positions, but they also created a funnel. If the Marlowes came in shooting, it would be a slaughter zone. Cole positioned himself behind a water trough across from the bank, rifle ready, revolver loose in its holster. Yates took cover behind a support post for the general store's awning. The wait was excruciating. Minutes crawled past like hours. Cole's hands were steady. They always were when violence was imminent, but his mind raced. He thought about the kiss he'd given Eliza, impulsive and terrifying. Thought about Thomas's stew and laughter. Thought about the way Willow Bend had quietly wrapped itself around his heart when he wasn't paying attention. Then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses, coming fast. "Here we go," Yates said quietly. Remember, let me do the talking. Four riders appeared at the western end of Main Street, slowing from a gallop to a trot as they entered town. Even from a distance, Cole could read violence in the way they sat their horses, the casual arrogance of men who'd learned the world would bend to force. The Marlowe Gang. They rode in a loose line, spreading out as they came. Cole's eyes cataloged details with practiced efficiency. The man on the left was massive, easily 6'4", with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. That would be Jake Marlowe, the leader, known for beating men to death with his bare hands when bullets seemed too merciful. Next to him rode a wiry man with red hair and a nervous energy, Nevada Red, the fastest draw of the group. The other two were harder to distinguish at this distance, but one had a bandana covering the lower half of his face, and the other wore a long duster despite the heat. They pulled their horses to a stop in the center of Main Street, maybe 30 yards from where Cole crouched. Close enough to talk, far enough that any shooting would give both sides a chance to find cover. Jake Marlowe surveyed the street with cold eyes, taking in the closed shutters, the absence of civilians, the unmistakable signs of prepared defense. A slow smile spread across his scarred face. "Well now," he called out, his voice carrying easily in the tense silence. "Seems like Willowbend is expecting company. That's right unfriendly." Yates stepped out from behind his post, hands visible but close to his gun. Cole remained in cover, watching, waiting. "This is Sheriff Ben Yates. You boys are welcome to water your horses and move on, but if you're planning trouble, I suggest you reconsider." Jake laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You suggest, do you? That's precious. Old man, we've killed real lawmen in towns 10 times this size. What makes you think you can stop us?" "Maybe I can't," Yates said calmly, "but you'll lose at least 2 men in the trying, and I'm guessing you'd rather keep your gang intact." Nevada Red spoke up, his voice high and tense. "We heard you got a bank here. Figure it's got enough to make a stop worthwhile." "Bank's got maybe $300. Hardly worth dying for." "That's for us to decide." The man with the bandana had a southern drawl, slow and menacing. "Now, you can either step aside peaceable-like, or we can shoot our way through. Either way, we're getting what we came for." Cole watched Jake Marlowe's hand drift toward his gun, subtle but unmistakable. This was going to go bad. The gang hadn't ridden all this way to be turned back by an old sheriff and a few farmers with rifles. They needed a show of force, needed to prove they weren't afraid, needed blood to maintain their reputation. Cole made a decision. He stood slowly, rifle aimed at Jake Marlowe's chest, and stepped into view. "That's far enough." 4 pairs of eyes swung toward him. Nevada Red's hand twitched toward his gun, and Cole shifted his aim fractionally. "Don't. You're fast, but you're not faster than a bullet already aimed at your heart." "Who the hell are you?" Jake demanded. "Deputy Cole Maddox, and I'm telling you the same thing the sheriff did. Ride on or die here. Your choice." Something flickered in Jake's eyes, recognition maybe, or respect for another killer. "Deputy Maddox. I heard about a lawman by that name in Nebraska. Story goes he turned in his badge after calling out his sheriff for corruption. That you?" "Was." "So what are you doing playing lawman in this shithole town?" "Protecting people who matter to me." Jake's smile returned, uglier than before. "People who matter. Well, ain't that sweet? Boys, we got ourselves a hero." The shooting started so fast, Cole barely registered the movement. Nevada Red drew with the speed he was famous for, his gun clearing leather and rising toward Yates. Cole fired, pure instinct, no thought, and Nevada Red jerked backward as the bullet took him high in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. Then everything exploded into chaos. The Marlows scattered, their horses screaming and rearing. Gunfire erupted from every direction: the mercantile roof, the bank windows, the alley beside the saloon. Jake Marlowe returned fire with a rifle, his shots precise and deadly. Wood splintered from the post where Yates had been standing, but the sheriff had already moved, diving behind a rain barrel and coming up shooting. Cole worked the lever on his rifle, firing, cycling, firing again. The fourth Marlowe, the one in the duster, tumbled from his horse, clutching his leg. But Jake and the southern man with the bandana were already moving, using their horses as shields and shooting as they retreated toward the bank. "They're making for the bank," Sam shouted from the mercantile roof. Cole broke from cover, running low and fast across the street. Bullets kicked up dust around his feet. He heard Yates yelling something, heard more gunfire from the defenders, heard screaming that might have been horses or men or both. His world narrowed to movement and breath and the heavy weight of the rifle in his hands. Jake Marlowe crashed through the bank's front door, the Southern man right behind him. Cole followed without thinking, his momentum carrying him through the entrance into sudden dimness. A shotgun blast nearly took his head off. Cole dropped and rolled, coming up behind a desk as buckshot shredded the doorframe where he'd been standing. The Southern man was reloading, and Cole used those precious seconds to assess. The bank was small. A main room with a teller's window and vault in back, a couple of desks, a staircase leading to the second floor where Michael and his brother were supposed to be positioned. But there was no sound from upstairs, which meant something had gone wrong. Jake Marlowe appeared from behind the vault door, dragging someone. The bank manager, an elderly man named Peterson, his face white with terror. Jake held a revolver to Peterson's head. "Drop it!" Jake roared. Jake sighed. "Drop the rifle or I paint the walls with his brains!" Cole's mind raced. The Southern man had his shotgun reloaded now, both barrels aimed at Cole's position. Jake had a hostage and the cold eyes of a man who'd kill without hesitation. Upstairs was silent, which likely meant Michael and his brother were dead or incapacitated. This had gone from bad to catastrophic in seconds. "I said drop it!" Jake pressed the gun harder against Peterson's temple. The old man whimpered. Cole set the rifle down slowly, hands visible. "Easy. Nobody else needs to die here." "Smart man." Jake's smile was vicious. Now the pistol. Slow. Cole reached for his Colt, mind racing through options. He could draw and fire. He was fast enough, maybe. But Jake would kill Peterson. The Southern man would likely kill Cole. Even if Cole survived, an innocent man would die, and that was unacceptable. But then a voice came from the staircase, strong and clear and utterly unexpected. "Let him go." Eliza stood halfway up the stairs, rifle leveled at Jake Marlowe's back. She must have come in through the rear entrance, must have seen the situation and flanked them while they focused on Cole. Her hands were steady, her face set with determination that made Cole's heart stop. "Little girl, you better put that—" Jake started to turn, still holding Peterson. "I'm not a little girl, and I'm a better shot than you think. That rifle you're holding, it's pointed at Mr. Peterson. Mine's pointed at your spine. You shoot him, I shoot you. You want to risk it?" The Southern man swung his shotgun toward Eliza, and Cole moved. He drew his Colt in one smooth motion and fired twice. The first bullet took the Southern man in the chest, the second in the throat. The shotgun discharged into the ceiling as the man fell, plaster raining down. Jake Marlowe spun, trying to bring his gun around, but he'd lost his focus. Cole fired again, hitting Jake's gun hand. The revolver clattered to the floor. Jake roared in pain and rage, shoving Peterson away and charging at Cole like a wounded bear. They collided with bone-jarring force. Cole's gun went flying. Jake was massive, fueled by pain and fury, his fists like hammers. A punch caught Cole's jaw, snapping his head back. Another drove into his ribs, cracking something. Cole fought back with desperate efficiency, driving his knee into Jake's gut, his elbow into Jake's wounded hand. They crashed through a desk, wood splintering. Jake's hands found Cole's throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. Cole's vision started to gray at the edges. He clawed at Jake's face, found the scar, dug his thumb in viciously. Jake screamed and loosened his grip just enough. Cole bucked, throwing the bigger man off, scrambling for his dropped Colt. His hand closed around the grip just as Jake lunged again, and Cole rolled, brought the gun up, and fired point blank into Jake Marlowe's chest. The outlaw's momentum carried him forward, and he collapsed on top of Cole, dead weight and fading life. Cole shoved the body off and lay there for a moment, gasping, tasting blood, his ribs screaming with every breath. "Cole!" Eliza was beside him, her hands on his face. "Are you hurt? Cole, answer me!" "I'm all right," he managed, though his voice came out as a rasp. "Are you?" "I'm fine. Mr. Peterson's fine. Cole, you're bleeding." He was. A cut above his eye, blood streaming down his face. His lip was split. His ribs were definitely cracked. But he was alive, and so was Eliza, and that was all that mattered. Yates burst through the door, gun drawn, taking in the scene. 2 dead outlaws, Peterson shaking but unhurt, Eliza kneeling beside Cole, who was trying to sit up and failing. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, the sheriff breathed. Michael? Tom? Upstairs, Cole got out. Haven't heard from them. Yates took the stairs two at a time. A moment later, his voice came down, shaken. They're alive. Knocked out, tied up. Marlowe's must have come in through the back before the shooting started. Cole finally managed to sit, leaning heavily against the ruined desk. Eliza was examining his injuries with gentle efficiency, her hands trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. What were you thinking? Cole asked her. You promised to stay in the store. You needed help. I wasn't going to let you die. Her eyes were fierce. Don't you dare be angry with me for saving your life. Cole almost laughed, but it hurt too much. Not angry, terrified. You could have been killed. So could you, but we weren't. Eliza's hand touched his cheek, careful of the cut. We're both alive, Cole. That's what matters. Outside, the street was coming back to life. Cole could hear voices, some shouting for the doctor, others checking on the fallen outlaws. Yates came back down with Michael and his brother, both groggy but otherwise unhurt. They'd been ambushed while watching the street. Never saw the Marlowes come through the back. The doctor arrived. A middle-aged woman named Sarah Chen, who took one look at Cole and started issuing orders. Get him to my office. Those ribs need wrapping, and that cut needs stitches. The others, Cole protested. Nevada Red, the fourth man. Nevada Red's shoulder is shattered, but he'll live to hang, Yates said. The fourth man bled out in the street. It's over, Cole. You stopped them. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and laudanum. Dr. Chen cleaned and stitched Cole's face, wrapped his ribs so tight he could barely breathe, and gave him something bitter to drink that made the room swim. Through it all, Eliza stayed by his side, holding his hand when the pain spiked, refusing to leave despite Dr. Chen's suggestions that she might want to wait outside. By the time Dr. Chen finished, twilight was falling. Cole was propped on an examination table, shirtless and bandaged, feeling like he'd been trampled by horses, which wasn't far from the truth. You'll be sore for weeks, Dr. Chen said, washing her hands. 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising, mild concussion. You're lucky that monster didn't snap your neck. Doesn't feel lucky, Cole muttered. You're alive. In my book, that's lucky. She dried her hands and turned to Eliza. Keep him quiet for the next few days. No heavy lifting, no unnecessary movement. He tries to play hero again. You sit on him. Eliza managed a small smile. Yes, ma'am. After Dr. Chen left, they sat in silence for a moment. Cole could hear celebration starting outside, the kind of relieved, slightly manic joy that came after surviving something terrible. Someone was playing a fiddle. Voices raised in laughter and tears both. They're calling you a hero, Eliza said softly. I'm not. You are. You saved Mr. Peterson. You stopped the Marlowes. You protected this whole town. I just did what needed doing. That's what heroes do, Cole. Eliza's eyes were bright with unshed tears. When I saw Jake Marlowe choking you, when I thought... Her voice broke. Cole reached for her hand with his good arm, ignoring the protest from his ribs. I'm all right. We're both all right. You almost weren't. The tears spilled over now. And I realized that I can't. I don't want to imagine this town without you. I don't want to imagine my life without you. Cole's throat tightened. Eliza. I know you're scared. I know you think you're broken, that you don't deserve happiness. But Cole, you're wrong. She squeezed his hand. You're brave and good, and you care so much, even when you pretend you don't. And She took a shaky breath. I'm falling in love with you. I probably started falling the moment you rode into town looking like the world had beaten you down, and you were still standing. The words should have terrified him. A week ago, they would have sent him running. But lying there, battered and exhausted, his defenses in ruins, Cole found he couldn't hide anymore. I loved my wife, he said quietly. Loved her and our daughter more than breathing. When they died, I thought I died too. Thought the best parts of me went in the ground with them. Cole, let me finish. I've spent 7 years convinced I didn't deserve to heal, didn't deserve to feel anything but grief. Then I came here, and you looked at me like I was worth something. Like I was more than my pain. He met her eyes. You scare me, Eliza Warren. Because when I'm with you, I want things I swore I'd never want again. I want to stay. I want to build something. I want, his voice cracked, I want to be the man you seem to think I am. You already are. I don't know if I can be what you need. I don't need you to be anything except yourself, broken parts and all. Eliza leaned in, her forehead resting gently against his. We're all broken, Cole. The question is whether we're brave enough to let someone love us anyway. Cole closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her breath, the gentle pressure of her hand in his. Something inside him that had been frozen for 7 years began, finally, to thaw. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. When she kissed him, carefully, mindful of his split lip, it felt like coming home after a journey so long he'd forgotten where he started. Cole's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears, and for the first time in 7 years he let himself hope. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Yates poked his head in, saw them, and smiled. Sorry to intrude, just wanted to check on my deputy. Cole had forgotten about the badge, still pinned to his bloody shirt. I should give that back. Why? You've earned it 3 times over today. Besides, I meant what I said before. I need help, and you're the best man for the job. Yates stepped fully into the room. Town council wants to make it official. Full deputy, decent wage, room and board if you want it. What do you say? Cole looked at Eliza, who was smiling through her tears, looked at the badge, symbol of everything he'd run from, looked at his own bandaged hands, still capable of violence, but maybe also capable of protection, of service, of purpose. I say yes, he heard himself answer, on one condition. Name it. I want Sundays off. Seems like a good day for church socials and dinners with friends. Yates's grin was enormous. I think we can arrange that. After the sheriff left, Eliza helped Cole into a clean shirt, moving slowly, both of them hyper-aware of every touch, every brush of skin against skin. The laudanum was making Cole pleasantly fuzzy, the pain receding to a dull throb. You should rest, Eliza said. Doctor, Chen said. I know what she said, but I'm not ready to sleep yet. Cole caught her hand. Stay with me? Just for a while. So she did. They sat together on the examination table in Dr. Chen's office, while outside Willow Bend celebrated survival and mourned the near miss of tragedy. Thomas Warren came by to check on them, his eyes bright with relief when he saw Cole was relatively intact. Mrs. Hartley brought soup that Cole couldn't eat, but appreciated anyway. Sam the blacksmith stopped in to shake Cole's hand and thank him for his bravery. But mostly, it was just Cole and Eliza, talking quietly about everything and nothing. She told him about her mother, about the dreams she'd put aside to help her father. He told her about Sarah and Emma, about the good years before the loss, about learning to remember love without being destroyed by grief. Do you think they'd approve? Cole asked. Your mother, my wife. Do you think they'd understand? Eliza considered this seriously. I think they'd want us to be happy. I think they'd know that loving again doesn't diminish what came before. I'll always love Sarah and Emma. I know. And I'll always love my mother. But Cole, there's room in our hearts for more than one kind of love. Room for the past and the future both. It was the wisest thing anyone had said to him in years. As full night fell and the celebration outside began to wind down, Dr. Chen returned to shoo them out. He needs rest, Miss Warren, and you need to go home before your father worries himself sick. Reluctantly, Eliza stood, but she kissed Cole's forehead before leaving, her lips warm and soft against his skin. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't you dare try to work. Wouldn't dream of it, Cole lied. He ended up staying in Dr. Chen's back room overnight, too battered to make it to the boarding house. She gave him more laudanum and a stern lecture about listening to his body, then left him alone in the quiet darkness. Cole lay there, staring at the ceiling, his mind too active for sleep despite the drugs. He'd killed 2 men today. Nearly died himself. Confessed feelings he'd buried so deep he'd almost forgotten they existed. Accepted a job, a place, a future. He thought about Jake Marlowe's dead eyes, about the terrible moment when those massive hands had closed around his throat. Thought about Eliza's voice cutting through the chaos, about her hands on his face, about the way she'd looked at him like he was worth saving. For 7 years, Cole had been convinced his story ended the day Sarah and Emma died. that everything after was just epilogue, empty years to endure until death finally caught up with him. But lying there in the darkness, bandaged and aching and alive, he began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Outside, Willow Bend settled into peaceful sleep, a town that had faced evil and survived. And in Dr. Chen's back room, Cole Maddox, former drifter, reluctant hero, broken man learning to believe in second chances, finally let himself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new possibilities. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Cole wasn't running. He was home. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Dr. Chen's back room, and Cole woke to pain that made the previous night's discomfort feel like a gentle warning. Every breath sent fire through his ribs. His jaw throbbed where Jake Marlowe's fist had connected. The cut above his eye had stiffened overnight, pulling at the stitches when he tried to open his eyes fully. He attempted to sit up and immediately regretted it, a groan escaping before he could stop it. "I told you to stay still." Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway with a tray, coffee, bread, and what looked like more of that bitter medicine. "You've got the healing capacity of a man half your age, but that doesn't mean you should test it." "Need to get up," Cole managed, though even talking hurt. "Can't stay in bed." "You can and you will, at least for today. Sheriff's orders, reinforced by mine." She set the tray on a side table and helped him sit up with surprising strength for a woman her size. "Drink the medicine first, then you can have coffee." Cole obeyed, grimacing at the taste. But within minutes, the sharp edges of pain began to dull. Dr. Chen watched him with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen plenty of stubborn men try to push through injuries that required rest. "You saved lives yesterday," she said, pouring coffee. "Peterson's already been by this morning to thank you, so has half the town council. You're a genuine hero, Deputy Maddox." "Just did what needed doing." "That's what every hero says." She handed him the coffee cup, steadying it when his hand shook slightly. "But I'll tell you what I told them. Heroism doesn't mean much if you don't take care of yourself afterward. Those ribs need time to knit. That concussion needs rest. You push too hard too fast, you'll do permanent damage." Cole sipped the coffee, strong and hot, and exactly what he needed. "How long?" 2 weeks minimum before any kind of physical work. 4 before I'd recommend anything strenuous. 6 before you should even think about another gunfight." Dr. Chen's expression was stern. "I mean it, Cole. Your body's been through hell. Give it time to heal." The idea of 2 weeks confined and useless made Cole's skin crawl, but he recognized the wisdom in her words. He'd seen men push too hard after injuries, watched them cripple themselves permanently because they couldn't accept temporary weakness. "I'll try," he said. "You'll do more than try. Because Eliza Warren has already informed me that she'll be checking on you daily, and that woman is more stubborn than you and I combined." Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "She cares about you, quite a bit, from what I can see." Cole didn't know what to say to that. The previous night's confessions felt raw in the morning light, exposed and vulnerable. He'd told Eliza he was falling for her, had admitted he wanted to stay, wanted to build something. In the heat of survival and pain and laudanum, it had felt right. Now, with a clearer head, the enormity of that decision pressed down on him. He was committed now. To this town, to this badge, to this woman who somehow saw value in a man who'd spent 7 years convinced he had none. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. A knock on the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Dr. Chen answered it, and Eliza's voice carried through, anxious, hopeful, determined. "Is he awake? Can I see him?" "He's awake and medicated and grumpy about staying in bed. Come on in." Eliza appeared in the doorway carrying a basket that smelled like fresh bread and something sweet. She'd changed from yesterday's dress into a simple work outfit, her hair braided and pinned up, but her eyes were shadowed with worry and lack of sleep. "Cole?" She crossed to him quickly, setting the basket down and taking his free hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I fought a bear and lost." He managed a small smile despite the pain it caused his split lip. "But I'm alive thanks to you." "We're both alive thanks to each other." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gentle on his. "I brought breakfast, Pa's bread, and some of Mrs. Hartley's jam. I wasn't sure what you'd be able to eat." Already fed him, Dr. Chen said, but I'm sure he won't turn down something that tastes better than my cooking. They spent the morning in quiet companionship. Eliza told Cole about the aftermath he'd missed. Nevada Red had been taken to the territorial jail in Dodge City under heavy guard, would likely hang within a month for his crimes. The bodies of Jake Marlowe, his brother, and the Southern gunman had been buried in the outlaw section of the cemetery with minimal ceremony. The bank had reopened that morning, Mr. Peterson still shaken, but determined to show that Willowbend wouldn't be cowed by violence. The town wants to hold a ceremony, Eliza said. Honor you and Sheriff Yates and everyone who fought. Pa's already talking about a plaque for the general store, defended by heroes or some such. Cole shook his head, immediately regretted the movement as pain spiked. Don't need recognition, just did my job. You saved lives, Cole. Let people thank you for it. Eliza, please. Her eyes were serious. I know you're not comfortable with praise. I know you think what you did was just duty, but these people, my people, they need to express their gratitude. They need to celebrate survival. Don't take that away from them. Put like that, Cole couldn't argue. He nodded reluctantly, and Eliza's smile was reward enough for his discomfort. Dr. Chen eventually shooed Eliza out, insisting Cole needed rest, but she promised to return that afternoon, and the anticipation of seeing her again made the prospect of lying in bed slightly more bearable. Sleep came easier than expected, the medicine and exhaustion pulling Cole under into dreamless darkness. When he woke, afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, and Sheriff Yates was sitting in the chair beside the bed, reading a week-old newspaper. Welcome back, Yates said, setting the paper aside. How are you holding up? Been better. Cole's voice was rough from sleep. Been worse, too. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about being afraid to let people matter, about running from pain. Yates leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I did the same thing after my wife died. Buried myself in work, kept everyone at arm's length, convinced myself that staying numb was the same as staying strong. What changed? Time, mostly. And the slow realization that numbness isn't strength, it's just another kind of death. I was breathing and moving and doing my job, but I wasn't living. Yates met Cole's eyes. You've got a chance here that I almost missed. A good woman who sees you clearly and cares anyway. A town that needs you. A purpose that matters. Don't waste it being afraid. Easy to say, harder to do. Of course it's hard. Anything worth having is hard. But Cole, you've already done the hardest part. You stayed. You put down roots. You let yourself care enough to risk dying for these people. Now you just have to let yourself live for them too. The words settled into Cole's chest, heavy with truth. Yates was right. Somewhere in the chaos of the past weeks, Cole had stopped running. He'd planted himself in Willowbend soil like a stubborn weed, and now he was growing whether he liked it or not. The deputy position, Cole said. That offer still stand? Absolutely. Town council already approved the budget. $30 a month plus room and board. There's a small apartment above the jail that's yours if you want it. $30 was more than Cole had made in months of drifting. A real wage for real work, the kind of stability he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve. I'll take it, he said. Soon as Dr. Chen clears me for work. She said 2 weeks minimum. I'm holding you to that. Yates stood, retrieving his hat. In the meantime, you rest and heal. The town's not going anywhere, and neither are you. After the sheriff left, Cole lay there thinking about the future, a concept he'd avoided for 7 years. He'd have an apartment, a job, a reason to wake up each morning beyond simple survival. He'd have Eliza, if he didn't mess it up. He'd have people who depended on him, who trusted him, who'd welcomed him despite every reason not to. It should have felt like a trap. Instead, it felt like possibility. The days that followed established a rhythm. Cole remained at Dr. Chen's for 3 more days until he could walk without wanting to scream, then moved to the apartment above the jail. It was small, a single room with a bed, a stove, a table, and 2 chairs, a washstand, but it was clean, and it was his. More permanence than he'd had since Sarah died. Eliza visited daily, bringing food and conversation and a brightness that made even the worst pain bearable. Thomas Warren came too, bringing books and news of the town. Sheriff Yates dropped by each evening to play chess and discuss cases, treating Cole like a partner rather than a subordinate. The town itself seemed determined to mother him back to health. Mrs. Hartley sent over extra blankets and her famous chicken soup. Sam the blacksmith crafted a new iron poker for the stove when he saw Cole struggling with the old broken one. Jacob's wife, Anna, brought fresh eggs and vegetables from their garden. Cole, who'd spent years avoiding human connection, found himself drowning in kindness. It was uncomfortable and overwhelming and secretly wonderful. 2 weeks after the shooting, Dr. Chen declared him fit for light duty. Cole immediately tried to overdo it and was sternly lectured by both the doctor and Eliza, who threatened to tie him to a chair if he didn't pace himself. He compromised by taking on desk work, filing reports, organizing records, updating wanted posters, and left the physical patrolling to Yates. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, 3 weeks after the Marlowe gang, that Cole finally had the conversation he'd been avoiding. Eliza had come by the jail with lunch, sandwiches and apple pie, and they were eating at Cole's small table when she said, "You've been here almost a month now. Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. Happy? Content then. Satisfied. Whatever word feels right. Eliza set down her sandwich, her expression serious. "I know you stayed because of the deputy job and because of what happened with the Marlowes. But Cole, I need to know, are you staying because you want to or because you feel obligated?" Cole put down his own food, giving her question the consideration it deserved. A month ago, he would have said obligation, would have insisted he was just doing his duty until something better came along. But that would be a lie now, and Eliza deserved better than lies. "I'm staying because I want to," he said slowly. "Because for the first time in 7 years, I wake up and don't immediately wish I hadn't. Because this place, this town, these people, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope, purpose. A reason to believe I might deserve a future after all." Eliza's eyes shimmered with tears, but she was smiling. "That's all I needed to hear." "But I'm scared," Cole continued, needing her to understand. "I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll wake up one day and the grief will be back and I won't be able to fight it, that I'll hurt you without meaning to because I don't remember how to be close to someone without losing them." "Cole, love isn't about guarantees, it's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Eliza reached across the table, taking both his hands in hers. "I'm scared too. Scared you'll leave. Scared I'm not enough to make you stay. Scared I'll lose you the way I lost my mother. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." The simple honesty of it broke something loose in Cole's chest. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her properly for the first time since the shooting, slow and deep and full of everything he didn't have words for. Eliza melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a perfect moment nothing hurt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza laughed shakily. "Your ribs are fine," Cole lied. They were screaming, but he didn't care. Liar. But she was smiling, her face flushed and happy. "Dr. Chen's going to kill us both." Worth it. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything and nothing. Eliza's dreams of maybe expanding the store, Cole's thoughts on improving town security, their shared love of autumn weather and dislike of overly sweet coffee. Easy conversation between two people learning how to be together, how to navigate the space between friendship and something deeper. As the sun began to set, Eliza stood reluctantly. "I should get back. Pa will be closing up soon and he'll need help with inventory." "I'll walk you." Cole reached for his hat. "You don't have to." "I want to." They walked slowly through the quiet streets, Cole matching his pace to Eliza's. The evening was cool and clear, the sky turning brilliant shades of orange and pink. Willow Bend was settling into its evening routine, lanterns flickering on in windows, the smell of cooking fires, distant sounds of children being called in for supper. It felt like home in a way Cole hadn't experienced since Missouri. At the door to the general store, Eliza turned to face him. "Thank you for lunch, and for the conversation, and for being honest with me. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was too stubborn to see what was right in front of me." I'm very persistent when I want something. Her eyes were dancing with mischief. And I want you, Cole Maddox. Broken pieces and all. You're sure about that? More sure than I've been about anything. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Now go rest before Dr. Chen hears you walked 6 blocks and has both our hides. Cole watched her disappear into the store, then made his way back to the jail, his ribs aching but his heart lighter than it had been in years. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in patience. Cole's ribs healed slowly. His bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. Dr. Chen cleared him for full duty 6 weeks after the shooting, and Cole threw himself into the work with an intensity that made Yates shake his head in amusement. You know you don't have to prove anything, the sheriff said one afternoon as they patrolled Main Street together. The town already trusts you. Not trying to prove anything, just trying to be useful. You're more than useful, Cole. You're essential. Hell, I don't know what I'd do without you at this point. You've reorganized the entire filing system, updated our wanted posters, improved our patrol routes, and you broke up that fight at the saloon last week without a single punch thrown. That's not just useful, that's damn near miraculous. Cole shrugged off the praise, uncomfortable as always with recognition. But privately, he had to admit it felt good to be needed, to be competent at something that mattered. His relationship with Eliza deepened as autumn progressed toward winter. They fell into an easy rhythm, dinners at the Warren apartment above the store several times a week, walks along the creek on Sunday afternoons, stolen moments in the quiet of the general store after closing. Cole found himself sharing pieces of his past he'd never spoken aloud, and Eliza offered her own stories in return. He learned that she'd wanted to be a teacher before her mother got sick, had dreamed of running a school for frontier children, that she sometimes felt trapped by duty and loved both, wanting to honor her father's needs while also craving her own life, that she worried about growing old in Willowbend without ever seeing anything beyond the prairie. You could still teach, Cole said one evening as they sat on the store's front step watching the sun set. Could start a school here. Town's growing, needs education for the children. With what time? The store takes everything I have. What if it didn't have to? Cole turned to face her. What if you hired help? Used some of the profits to pay someone to manage things a few days a week so you could pursue teaching? Eliza looked startled, as if the thought had never occurred to her. Pa would never agree. He's run this store himself since my mother died. Maybe it's time he learned to accept help. God knows he lectures me about accepting help often enough. She laughed at that, then grew thoughtful. It's something to consider, though I don't know if I remember enough to actually teach. You're one of the smartest people I know. You'd figure it out. The conversation planted a seed. Over the following weeks, Cole watched Eliza's mind work through the possibilities. She started ordering textbooks along with the usual store supplies, started talking to parents about their children's education, started dreaming out loud about curriculum and lesson plans. It reminded Cole of the way he'd felt when Yates first offered him the deputy position, that flutter of hope, the dangerous possibility that life might hold more than just survival. In late November, the first snow came. Cole woke to a world transformed, white and clean and beautiful. He stood at his window above the jail, coffee cup in hand, and watched Willowbend emerge into winter morning. Children ran out to make snow angels. Shopkeepers swept their boardwalks. Sam the blacksmith's forge sent up dark smoke against the pale sky. This was his town now. These were his people. The realization didn't frighten him anymore. That afternoon, as Cole was finishing patrol, Thomas Warren appeared at the jail, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. Cole, you got a minute? Of course. Everything all right? Thomas came inside, removing his hat and worrying the brim between his hands. Need to talk to you about Eliza. Cole's stomach dropped. If I've done anything to upset her, or disrespect, no, nothing like that. Thomas actually smiled. Opposite, really. Cole, I'm not a blind man. I see how you two look at each other. I see how happy she is when you're around, how you light up when she walks in a room. I see two people falling in love. Sir, let me finish. Eliza's mother was the love of my life. When she died, I thought that was it for happiness in this family. I focused on the store, on being a good father, on surviving. But watching Eliza with you, I'm reminded that love doesn't die just because people do. It transforms, makes room for new connections, new joy. Thomas stepped closer, his expression serious. You're a good man, Cole Maddox. I've seen how you've changed since coming here, seen you heal, seen you open up, seen you become part of this community. And I've seen how you treat my daughter with respect and tenderness and genuine care. Cole's throat was tight. He had no idea where this was going, but the weight of Thomas's words pressed on him. What I'm saying is, when you're ready, when the time feels right, you have my blessing to ask Eliza to marry you. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. Marriage. The idea hadn't even fully formed in his mind, though, if he was honest, some part of him had been circling it for weeks. But hearing Thomas say it out loud made it real, immediate, terrifying. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Cole managed. Don't know if I can be what she deserves. Nobody's ever ready. And as for deserving her, Cole, she chose you. That's what matters. Not whether you think you're worthy, but whether you're willing to try to be. Thomas put a hand on Cole's shoulder. You've spent 7 years punishing yourself for surviving when your family didn't. Maybe it's time to forgive yourself and accept the life that's being offered. After Thomas left, Cole sat at his desk in the jail, staring at nothing, his mind racing. Marriage, a wife again, after Sarah, a future, a family, a forever. The thought should have sent him spiraling into panic. Instead, he felt something that might have been peace settling over him. He loved Eliza. Somewhere between that first dance and yesterday's shared laughter, between her stubborn kindness and her fierce courage, he'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with her. Different than his love for Sarah. Not better or worse, just different. A second chance he never thought he'd get. The question was whether he was brave enough to take it. That night, Cole lay in his bed above the jail and thought about Sarah and Emma for the first time in weeks. Not with the crushing grief that usually accompanied their memory, but with something softer, gratitude for the time they'd had, sorrow for what was lost, and a gentle acknowledgement that loving them didn't mean he couldn't love again. I think you'd like her, he whispered into the darkness. Eliza. She's strong and kind, and she sees the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves. She makes me want to be better, makes me believe I can be. The room was silent, but Cole felt something release in his chest. Permission, maybe, or forgiveness. The ghosts he'd been carrying for 7 years didn't vanish, but they grew lighter, less consuming. He could love Eliza and honor Sarah's memory both. Could build a new life without betraying the old one. Could choose happiness without guilt. It was the most liberating thought he'd had in years. December arrived with bitter cold and clear skies. Cole continued his work as deputy, earning the respect and trust of everyone in Willow Bend. He broke up fights, mediated disputes, helped Mrs. Henderson find her runaway pig, and talked young Timothy Morrison out of stealing from the general store by finding him honest work at the livery instead. He was good at this, at helping, at protecting, at being part of a community. It felt right in a way nothing had since he'd lost his family. And through it all, Eliza was there, constant, supportive, challenging him when he needed it, and comforting him when the old grief surfaced. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, their fears. They planned a Christmas social, argued amiably about the best way to organize store inventory, shared quiet moments that meant more than grand gestures. Cole found himself thinking about Thomas's words more and more, about marriage, about forever, about actually building the future he'd stopped believing in. He started saving money from his deputy wages, setting aside coins each week in a tin box hidden under his bed. He wasn't sure what he was saving for exactly. Maybe a ring, maybe a house, maybe just the possibility of something permanent. On Christmas Eve, the whole town gathered at the church for services and celebration. Cole sat with Eliza and Thomas, surrounded by people who'd become family. The church was warm and bright with candles, voices raised in carols that spoke of hope and redemption and new beginnings. As they sang, Cole looked around at the faces he'd come to know. Sheriff Yates, Mrs. Hartley, Dr. Chen, Sam and Jacob, and their families. Michael and his brother. The children who'd been born in Willow Bend and the adults who'd built it from nothing. His people. His home. When the service ended and they filed out into the snowy night, Eliza slipped her hand into Cole's. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. "Merry Christmas." He squeezed her hand, feeling the rightness of it, the way they fit together. "Eliza, Come to dinner tomorrow," she interrupted gently. "Pa and I would love to have you. We can exchange gifts and eat too much and just be together. What do you say?" Cole smiled. "I say yes. I'd like that very much." They stood there in the falling snow, hands linked, breath steaming in the cold air. Around them, Willow Bend celebrated survival and community and the promise of another year. And Cole Maddox, who'd ridden into town 4 months ago expecting nothing, found himself surrounded by everything he'd thought he'd lost forever. He was healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. The hollow-eyed drifter was transforming into someone who could smile without flinching, who could accept kindness without suspicion, who could imagine a future worth living. Eliza had done that. Her stubborn, patient, unwavering belief in him had done that. And Cole knew, standing there in the Christmas snow with her hand warm in his, that he was going to marry this woman. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even next month. But someday soon, when the moment was right, he would ask Eliza Warren to be his wife. The thought didn't terrify him anymore. It felt like coming home. Winter deepened its grip on the Kansas prairie, and with it came a transformation in Cole Maddox that even he couldn't deny. The hollow-eyed drifter who'd ridden into Willow Bend 5 months ago had been replaced by a man who smiled at children in the street, who knew every shopkeeper by name, who'd become as much a fixture of the town as the church steeple or the cottonwood trees lining the creek. Christmas dinner at the Warren home had been everything Cole had hoped for, and more. Thomas had cooked a turkey that filled the apartment with rich smells, and Eliza had baked pies that rivaled anything Mrs. Hartley had ever produced. They'd exchanged modest gifts. Cole gave Eliza a beautiful leather-bound journal he'd ordered from Kansas City for her to plan her school lessons, and she'd given him a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes. Thomas had presented Cole with a silver pocket watch that had belonged to Eliza's grandfather, and Cole had nearly wept at the symbolic weight of it. "You're family now," Thomas had said simply when Cole tried to protest the valuable gift. "This belongs with family." The words had settled into Cole's chest and stayed there, warm and solid and real. January brought bitter cold and opportunities. Sheriff Yates began talking seriously about retirement, mentioning more and more frequently that Cole would make an excellent successor when the time came. The town council approached Cole about permanent residency, offering to help him file for a homestead claim on land just outside town if he was interested in putting down deeper roots. Cole found himself saying yes to things he would have fled from 6 months ago. Yes to the homestead claim. Yes to considering the sheriff position. Yes to the future that kept reaching for him with gentle, insistent hands. But it was in early February, as winter began its slow retreat towards spring, that Cole finally made the decision that had been building since Christmas. He was going to ask Eliza to marry him. The realization had come to him during a quiet evening in his apartment, as he sat reviewing paperwork and found himself thinking not about reports, but about Eliza's laugh, about the way she hummed when she was concentrating, about how right it felt when she was beside him. He'd been reaching for the pocket watch Thomas had given him, a habit he'd developed, checking the time by the weight of family history, when it hit him with perfect clarity. He wanted to marry Eliza Warren, wanted to build a life with her, a home, maybe even a family someday if they were blessed. Wanted to wake up beside her for the rest of his life and fall asleep knowing she was there. Wanted to be the man she believed he could be, the husband she deserved, the partner who would stand beside her through whatever came. The thought didn't send him into panic. Instead, it filled him with a calm certainty that felt like the first truly adult decision he'd made since Sarah's death. But proposing required a ring, and that meant help. Cole found himself in an unlikely position 2 days later, sitting in Sam the blacksmith's workshop watching the big man work delicate magic with silver and a small diamond. "Got this from a jewelry maker in Dodge City," Sam explained, holding up the stone to the light. "Was saving it for something special. Seems like your proposal qualifies." "You're sure you want to part with it?" Cole asked. The diamond was small but clear, catching the forge light like captured starlight. "Cole, you saved this town. You gave me my life back when those outlaws came through. If I can help you start a marriage with the woman you love, that's payment enough." Sam began sketching designs on a piece of paper. "Now, what kind of ring does Eliza strike you as? Simple and practical, or something with a little flourish?" Cole thought about Eliza, her straightforward honesty, her lack of pretension, the way she valued substance over show. Simple, but beautiful, like her. Sam grinned. "I can work with that." Over the next 2 weeks, Cole watched the ring take shape. Sam crafted a delicate silver band with the small diamond set in a simple but elegant mounting. It was understated and lovely, exactly right for a woman who wore her strength quietly. While Sam worked on the ring, Cole worked on everything else. He filed the paperwork for his homestead claim, 160 acres of good land with a creek running through it and a stand of cottonwoods that would provide shade in summer. He began drawing plans for a house, something modest but solid that he could build with his own hands and the help of friends. Thomas caught him sketching one afternoon in the general store and looked over his shoulder with undisguised delight. "Planning something?" the older man asked innocently. Cole looked up, met Thomas's eyes, and saw nothing but encouragement there. "Thinking about building a house on that homestead claim. If I'm going to settle here permanently, I'll need a proper place." "Proper place for what exactly?" "For a family, eventually, if things work out." Thomas's smile was enormous. "I think things will work out just fine, son." The endorsement gave Cole confidence he hadn't known he needed. This was right. This was good. This was the future he deserved to claim. But even as Cole made his plans, old fears surfaced. Late at night, lying alone in his apartment, he sometimes found himself gripped by terror that felt like drowning. What if he proposed and Eliza said no? What if she realized he was still too broken, too damaged, too haunted by loss? What if he failed her the way he'd failed Sarah, unable to protect her from whatever cruel twist of fate the world might deliver? On one of these sleepless nights, Cole found himself at Sheriff Yates's door at 2 a.m, his anxiety too overwhelming to contain. Yates opened the door in his nightshirt, took one look at Cole's face and said, "Come in. I'll make coffee." They sat at Yates's kitchen table while the sheriff brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint, and Cole poured out everything: his fear of failing again, his guilt about moving on from Sarah, his terror that he didn't know how to be a husband anymore after 7 years of being alone. Yates listened without interruption, then set down his coffee cup and fixed Cole with a steady gaze. "You want to know the truth about marriage, Cole? It's not about being fearless. It's about being afraid and showing up anyway. It's choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when the past tries to tell you that loving someone means losing them." "But what if—" "Stop. There's no guarantee, Cole. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone. Sarah died. My Elizabeth died. Eliza's mother died. Death is part of life, and we can't control it." Yates leaned forward. "But here's what we can control: how we live. Whether we let fear make us small or whether we choose love, even though it's risky. You've been given a second chance that most men don't get. Are you really going to throw it away because you're scared?" Cole swallowed hard. "No. I'm going to ask her. I just needed to hear someone say I wasn't crazy for being terrified." "Oh, you're terrified. That's normal. I was terrified when I proposed to Elizabeth, and we'd known each other since childhood." Yates smiled. "But Cole, I saw you face down the Marlowe gang without flinching. You can face down your own fear long enough to ask a woman to marry you." Cole left Yates's house as dawn was breaking, feeling steadier. The fear hadn't vanished. He suspected it never would completely, but it no longer paralyzed him. By mid-February, Sam had finished the ring. Cole held it in his palm, feeling the weight of promise and commitment and hope, and knew the time had come. He'd been planning to wait until spring, maybe propose during a picnic by the creek or some other romantic setting. But Cole had never been good at patience, and every day he didn't ask felt like lying by omission. So on a Sunday afternoon in late February, when Willow Bend was quiet and peaceful under weak winter sun, Cole walked to the general store with the ring in his pocket and his heart in his throat. Eliza was there alone, Thomas having gone to visit a sick friend on the edge of town. She was reorganizing a shelf of canned goods, humming softly to herself, and she looked so perfectly right in this space she'd made her own that Cole's chest ached with love. She turned when the bell chimed and smiled. "Cole, I didn't expect you today. I thought you were helping Michael with his barn." "Finished early." Cole removed his hat, turning it in his hands nervously. "Eliza, do you have a minute to talk?" Something in his tone made her set down the cans she was holding and give him her full attention. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. I just—" Cole took a breath, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "I need to show you something. Will you come with me?" Eliza studied his face, clearly puzzled but willing. "All right, let me get my coat." Cole had thought about this moment obsessively for weeks, but now that it was here, his careful plans evaporated. He didn't want to propose in the store or in some perfectly orchestrated romantic setting. He wanted to show her the future he was trying to build, wanted her to see the life he was offering before he asked her to share it. They walked through town, Eliza chattering about the school she was planning to open in the spring, about the children who'd already expressed interest, about her nervousness and excitement. Cole listened, loving her even more for the passion in her voice, for the dreams she was finally allowing herself to pursue. When they reached the edge of town where his homestead claim began, Eliza looked around in confusion. "Cole, why are we—" "This is mine," Cole said, gesturing to the land spread before them. 160 acres. Filed the claim last month. It's official. Eliza's eyes went wide. "You claimed land? Cole, that's wonderful. But why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to wait until I was sure, until I knew what I was building." He took her hand, his palm sweating despite the cold. "Come on, I want to show you something else." He led her through the winter-brown grass to a clearing near the creek where the cottonwoods stood like sentinels. There, staked out with string and markers, was the outline of a house. Cole had spent hours getting it just right, large enough for a family but not ostentatious, positioned to catch summer breezes and winter sun. "I've been planning this for weeks," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "Working with Sam and Jacob on the design. It's going to be 2 bedrooms to start, with room to add more later if we need them. Kitchen with a good stove, a parlor with windows facing the creek, a porch where we can sit in the evenings and watch the sunset." Eliza turned to him, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Cole, what are you saying?" This was it, the moment that would change everything. Cole's hands were shaking as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring Sam had crafted. "I'm saying that I came to Willow Bend 5 months ago with nothing, no hope, no future, no belief that I deserved either. And then I met you." His voice cracked, but he pushed on. "You looked at me like I was worth something when I didn't believe I was. You were patient when I was difficult, kind when I was distant, brave when I was afraid. You taught me that loving again doesn't betray what I lost. It honors it. That living isn't the same as forgetting." Tears were streaming down Eliza's face now, but she was smiling. "I'm still scared," Cole continued. "Scared I'll fail you, scared I'll lose you, scared I'm not good enough for the life you deserve. But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting fear steal this second chance." He dropped to one knee in the cold grass, holding up the ring. "Eliza Warren, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see the best in everyone, including me. I want to build this house and fill it with laughter and maybe children if we're blessed. I want to grow old with you right here in this town that saved my life. Will you marry me?" For a moment that felt like eternity, Eliza just stared at him, tears running down her cheeks. Then she dropped to her knees in front of him, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him with a fierceness that took his breath away. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, Cole Maddox. I'll marry you. I'll build this life with you. I'll love you through the fear and the healing and whatever comes after." Cole's hand shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the silver bright against her skin, the small diamond catching the weak winter sun. Eliza held up her hand, admiring it, then launched herself into Cole's arms with enough force to knock them both over into the grass. They lay there laughing and crying and kissing, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen love despite fear, who decided that the risk of happiness was worth taking. When? Eliza asked when they finally sat up, grass in their hair and joy on their faces. When do you want to get married? Cole thought about waiting, about planning something elaborate, about giving her the wedding every woman deserved. But then he thought about 7 years wasted on grief and running, about all the time he'd already lost. As soon as possible, he said. I've waited long enough for a life worth living. I don't want to wait anymore. Neither do I. Eliza kissed him again, softer this time. Spring. Let's wait until spring when everything's new and growing. Give me time to finish planning the school and you time to start building our house. Then we'll get married and start our life together. Spring, Cole agreed. I can wait until spring. They walked back to town hand in hand, and by evening everyone in Willow Bend knew that Deputy Cole Maddox and Eliza Warren were engaged to be married. Thomas cried openly and pulled Cole into a fierce embrace, welcoming him officially into the family. Sheriff Yates shook Cole's hand so hard it ached and declared he'd never been prouder of anyone. Mrs. Hartley actually smiled, a genuine warm smile, and offered her boarding house for the wedding celebration. The next weeks were a blur of planning and preparation. Eliza threw herself into finalizing details for her school while also planning their wedding. Cole began building the house with help from every able-bodied man in town. Sam and Jacob showed up every Sunday with tools and enthusiasm. Michael and his brother helped frame the walls. Thomas worked alongside Cole, teaching him carpentry tricks and sharing stories about building the general store with Eliza's mother. As winter gave way to early spring, the house took shape. Walls rose against the prairie sky. Windows were fitted into frames. The roof went on, solid and strong. Inside, Cole crafted furniture by lamplight in his apartment, a bed frame, a table, chairs, each piece made with care and the hope of sharing it with Eliza. The school opened in March, with Eliza teaching 15 children in a converted storage building behind the church. Cole would stop by sometimes during patrol and watch through the window as she taught reading and arithmetic with patience and joy. Seeing her in her element, doing what she loved, made him love her even more. In early April, with the prairie turning green and wildflowers beginning to bloom, Eliza moved the last of her lesson materials into the schoolhouse and declared herself ready to focus on wedding planning. The house is nearly finished, Cole reported that evening as they sat on the unfinished porch watching the sunset. Another 2 weeks and we can move in furniture. It'll be ready. So will I. Eliza leaned against his shoulder. Pa's already emotional about me leaving. I think he's going to cry through the entire ceremony. So will I, probably. Really? She looked up at him, surprised. Really? Eliza, 6 months ago, I was a broken man who didn't believe in second chances. Now I'm about to marry the woman I love and move into a house I built with my own hands in a town that's become home. If that doesn't deserve tears, nothing does. She kissed him softly. Happy tears, though. The happiest. They set the date for the first Saturday in May. The whole town was invited and preparations became a community effort. Mrs. Hartley coordinated the food. Sam crafted iron hooks for the church to hang decorations. Dr. Chen offered to play piano for the ceremony. Jacob's wife Anna worked with other women to sew Eliza a dress of pale blue silk that had been ordered all the way from St. Louis. Cole had no family to invite. His parents had died years ago, and he'd lost touch with the few cousins scattered across Missouri and Illinois. But as he looked around at the people helping prepare for his wedding, he realized he did have family. Thomas and Yates and Sam and all the others who'd welcomed him, given him work, trusted him with their safety, and taught him that belonging was a choice as much as a circumstance. The night before the wedding, Thomas invited Cole to dinner, just the two of them, a last evening together as father and future son-in-law. They ate the stew that had become Thomas's specialty and talked about everything from store inventory to the future. I want you to know something, Thomas said as they finished eating. When my wife died, I thought my job was to protect Eliza from ever hurting that way again. I was overprotective, probably stifled her in ways I didn't mean to. But then you came along and I saw her come alive in a way she hasn't since her mother passed. Thomas, Let me finish. You've been good for my daughter, Cole. You've supported her dreams, encouraged her to teach, treated her like an equal partner instead of something fragile to protect. You've shown her what real partnership looks like. Thomas's eyes were wet. Her mother would have loved you. I know she would have. Cole's throat was too tight to speak. He reached across the table and gripped Thomas's hand, and they sat there in comfortable silence. Two men who'd both lost wives and found in each other something like the family they'd been missing. That night, Cole lay awake in his apartment above the jail for the last time. Tomorrow he'd marry Eliza and move into their house. Tomorrow his life as a husband would begin again. Tomorrow everything would change. The old fear tried to surface. What if something went wrong? What if he lost her too? What if he wasn't strong enough? But Cole pushed it down with the certainty he'd built over months of healing. He couldn't control the future. He couldn't guarantee that pain wouldn't find them. But he could choose love anyway. He could choose to show up, to commit, to believe in the life they were building together. That was enough. It had to be enough. Morning arrived clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a blessing. Cole dressed in new clothes, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, a vest that Thomas had given him as a wedding gift. He pinned his deputy's badge to the vest, a symbol of the man he'd become in Willow Bend. Sheriff Yates met him at the jail. Ready? More ready than I've been for anything. They walked to the church together, arriving early to find it already filling with people. The whole town had turned out, scrubbed and dressed in their finest. Flowers decorated every available surface. Wildflowers from the prairie, brought in by children who'd picked them at dawn. The windows were open, letting in spring breeze and birdsong. Cole stood at the front of the church with Yates beside him as his best man, watching people file in. Sam and Jacob with their families, Dr. Chen and Mrs. Hartley sitting together, Michael and his brother, Anna and the other women who'd sewn Eliza's dress, the children from Eliza's school, excited and barely able to sit still. Then the piano music changed, and everyone stood. Eliza appeared at the back of the church on Thomas's arm, and Cole's breath caught in his chest. She wore the pale blue dress, simple and elegant, with her dark hair loose and flowing. She carried wildflowers that matched the ones decorating the church. But it was her smile, radiant and certain and full of love, that made Cole's eyes burn with tears. As she walked down the aisle toward him, Cole thought about the journey that had brought them here. His long years of grief and running, her patient kindness that had refused to let him stay lost, the Marlowe gang that had forced him to fight for something beyond himself, the slow healing that had allowed him to believe in second chances. Thomas placed Eliza's hand in Cole's and stepped back, tears running down his weathered face. Cole held Eliza's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world and looked into her eyes. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. The circuit preacher who served Willow Bend and 3 neighboring towns spoke about love and commitment and the courage it took to choose happiness after loss. He talked about 2 people who'd found each other when they needed it most, who'd built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. When it came time for vows, Cole spoke from his heart. Eliza, I came to this town expecting nothing and planning to leave quickly, but you saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. You were patient when I was afraid, kind when I was difficult, brave when I wanted to run. You taught me that healing isn't forgetting, it's choosing to live again despite the pain. I promise to love you with everything I have, to support your dreams, to build a life with you that honors both our pasts and our future, to choose you every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You saved my life, Eliza Warren, and I will spend the rest of mine trying to be worthy of that gift. Eliza was crying openly now, but smiling through the tears. Her own vows were just as powerful. Cole, when you rode into Willow Bend, I saw a man who'd survived terrible loss but was still standing. I saw strength and goodness buried under grief and fear, and I just knew, that you were worth fighting for. You've shown me what real partnership looks like. You've encouraged my dreams and believed in my abilities when I doubted myself. You've given me hope for a future I'd stopped imagining. I promise to love you through the healing and the fear, to stand beside you in whatever comes, to build a home and a life that makes room for all of who we are. You're not broken, Cole Maddox. You're brave and good and mine, and I will love you until my last breath. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Cole he could kiss his bride, the entire church erupted in cheers and applause. Cole pulled Eliza close and kissed her with all the love and gratitude and hope he couldn't put into words, and she kissed him back with equal fervor. They were married. They were partners. They were home. The celebration that followed was everything a frontier wedding should be. Tables groaned under the weight of food that the whole town had contributed. The musicians played reels and waltzes. Children ran wild while adults danced and laughed and toasted the newlyweds with everything from fine whiskey to fresh cider. Cole danced with his wife. The word still felt miraculous, and with Mrs. Hartley and Dr. Chen and Anna and every woman who'd helped make this day possible. He shook hands with every man in town, accepted their congratulations and well wishes, and felt himself fully part of the community in a way that still amazed him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Cole and Eliza slipped away from the celebration. They walked hand in hand to their new house, which friends had decorated with flowers and filled with gifts, quilts and dishes and furniture and all the practical things a young couple needed. Cole lifted Eliza over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the parlor of their home. Their home. The words felt like magic. "Welcome home, Mrs. Maddox," Cole said softly. "Welcome home, husband." Eliza looked around at the house Cole had built, at the life they were beginning. "It's perfect. Everything's perfect." They stood together in the fading light, arms around each other, looking out the window at the prairie stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The land was green with spring growth, wildflowers dotting the grass like stars. The creek murmured its eternal song. The cottonwood swayed in the evening breeze. "Are you happy?" Eliza asked, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. Cole thought about the question, thought about the hollow-eyed drifter he'd been just 6 months ago, convinced he'd never feel anything but grief again. Thought about the journey from that brokenness to this moment, standing in a house he'd built with his own hands, married to a woman who'd seen the best in him when he couldn't see it himself, surrounded by a community that had welcomed him home. "I'm happy," he said, and felt the truth of it in his bones. "For the first time in 7 years, I'm genuinely, completely happy." "Good." Eliza turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. "Because this is just the beginning, Cole. We have a whole life ahead of us, a life we get to build together." "I know, and I'm not scared anymore." It was true. The fear that had haunted him for so long had finally released its grip. Well, maybe a little scared, but in a good way, in an excited about the future kind of way. "I'm scared too," Eliza admitted. "Scared and excited and so full of love I feel like I might burst with it." Cole kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. This woman had loved him back to life, had refused to let him stay lost in grief, had shown him that second chances were real and that hope could bloom even in the most barren soil. As darkness fell over the prairie and stars began to emerge in the vast Kansas sky, Cole and Eliza Maddox stood together in their new home and whispered about the future, about the children they hoped to have, about the school Eliza would grow, about the life they would build together in this town that had given them both more than they'd ever expected. Outside, the prairie wind carried the sounds of celebration still going on in town. The faint music of fiddles and laughter floated on the breeze. Somewhere, a coyote called to the rising moon. The world kept turning, indifferent to individual stories of loss and redemption. But inside the small house on the edge of Willow Bend, 2 people who'd been broken by grief and loneliness had found each other and chosen love, had decided that the risk of happiness was worth taking, had built something beautiful from the ruins of their pasts. Cole Maddox had been born into a world without kindness, had learned early that life could be cruel and unforgiving. But Eliza had loved him anyway, loved him through the fear and the healing, loved him until he forgot that he'd ever believed himself unworthy. And in loving her back, in choosing to build a life rather than just survive one, Cole had finally found what he'd been searching for all those years of drifting. He'd found home. Not in a place, though Willow Bend would always be dear to him. Not in a job, though being deputy gave him purpose. But in the woman standing beside him, in the community that had wrapped around them both, in the future they would face together. The cowboy born into a harsh world had learned, at last, that kindness existed, that love was real, that second chances were possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. And as Cole held his wife close and whispered promises into her hair, while stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, he knew with absolute certainty that he was finally, truly, completely home. The story that had begun with a hollow-eyed drifter riding into town expecting nothing had ended with a husband and wife standing together in a house built on hope, surrounded by love, ready to face whatever came next. It was a good ending, the best kind of ending, the kind that was really just a beginning.